A blinding flash tore across the sky. He whipped around instantly, eyes wide with shock, thinking, honestly, there can't be much left in this world worth enjoying. A truck barreled onto the road and ended 25-year-old Yusuke Yahaga's life in an instant. This was not the ending he ever wanted. And then they told him his reincarnation would come with a rare, unique profession. But when Yusuke heard that, he had no idea what any of it meant. The main character suddenly found himself in a room packed with strangers, when a bespectacled man whipped around and revealed he was a monk, then immediately urged everyone to embrace reincarnation. The blonde guy beside him stared off dreamily and blurts out, "Monk," and the man with glasses snaps his head to the side and says, "I'm next." Yusuke couldn't shake the thought that maybe he'd been reincarnated into another world. Then the dude beside him starts bragging about getting smashed by a 10-ton truck, and Yusuke's like, "Why are you talking nonsense like it's cool?" The bespectacled man spun toward one of the boys and declared, "You're a hero, a budding magician." And Yusuke couldn't help noticing there was zero cause and effect between how big the truck was and how good the special work turned out. Then the man snapped his gaze to the main character and swore that fate would crown him pastry chef in the family shop. Yusuke snapped, "What are you even talking about?" And the man shot up, waved his hand at everyone, and told them to enjoy their new life. After soaking in every detail he heard, the main character realized something chilling. After reincarnation, his future felt like it was locked, and he had zero freedom to choose his profession. Yusuke stepped outside, scanned the street, and froze. This didn't look like modern Japan at all. Then he spotted his reflection in a puddle and stared, because his face and clothes were exactly the same. Then he spotted a cluster of people drifting by, and when he looked closer, he knew adventurers just like that, which could only mean he'd been dropped into another world for real. The main character decided to tail them, and one of the guys even said he could make sense of their whole conversation, until the girl snapped, "We should organize a witch hunt." Yusuke leaned back, fully convinced everyone was cursing him, and burst out laughing. Then they all arrived in one spot, the dungeon entrance, and the main character finally realized he could read without panicking in this whole world. Right by the entrance, Yasuke scanned the place and clocked a whole bunch of benches. Strange as it was, it felt more like a train station packed with stalls. Then he spotted some strange food frying in hot oil, realizing he'd gone way too long without eating, and now he was broke to the bone. The seller snapped at him that if he couldn't cough up the money, he'd have to go earn it. Yusuke's mind raced, because he couldn't just march into the dungeon unarmed, and yeah, he was a pastry chef. An idea struck the main character like lightning, then it hit him again, "I'm a coder," and he slammed his own palm with his fist, right then and there. Then Yusuke snapped back to the stranger's tip, say the word and the store would unlock itself, and even though he felt totally lost, he decided to gamble on it. Once he spotted the perfect corner, he swung his gaze around, searching for the moment to strike. Then he blurted out that one word, boom. A stick snapped into his hands and both ends sprouted baskets packed with supplies. He stared like, "Wait, I've got stuff now." Even his clothes had swapped, and it felt like the coders all looked different too. But these sweets feel straight out of his childhood. Yeah, the inscriptions are different, yet he'd spot that wrapper in a heartbeat, like he could pick it out of 1,000. He figured he had zero sales experience, but his face looked like it could punch a deal into existence, so he had to bet everything on one survival or bust decision. Yusuke immediately shoved candies into the hands of everyone who walked by, but not a single person even flinched. Then he bragged that his sweets were super delicious and dirt cheap, and still nothing. Suddenly he blurted out "Dagashi," hoping the word would pull people in. Then a guy with a mohawk passing by glared at him with pure fury and scared the life out of him. Yusuke sobbed as he wondered how anyone could make it by peddling knockoff sweets, and with his dying breath he pleaded, "Who wants cheap sweets?" He watched her slip forward in a shy, awkward little shuffle, and when he flashed her a smile, he asked if she happened to like Dagashi. Right then her face lit up and she froze in total happy shock. The girl leaned in, eyed his baskets of goods, and then, like a burst of sunshine, smiled and said they were cute. The stranger jabbed her finger at random stuff and demanded, "What is this?" And Yusuke, instinctively pointing, named the gum. She said it was 10 yen, and then it finally hit him that the money here was probably totally different. The system window flashed the details. 10 packs of gum would refill 1 MP every 10 seconds while the aroma was active, and the strawberry ones cost 10 lira. Then it hit him. He wasn't just buying products, he was staring at their exact composition. He gripped a pack of chewing gum in his hands and grinned, said it was only 10 lira, and then the girl asked, "What's chewing gum?" Right there, it hit him. Nobody in this world had ever heard of it. Yusuke said out loud that this snack is meant for long chewing. You don't even need to wash it down. And while that scent is alive, it keeps restoring 6 MP of magic power every single minute. The girl grinned and called it cool, and he couldn't help but feel like she wasn't exactly fired up. So were there really better recovery options out there in this world? The girl grinned and said it looked amazing. She was going to grab it right now. She swore she'd buy it and hand it to Myra as a gift. With 20 lira clutched in embarrassment, he shot her a grateful thanks, then thought, 10 lira in copper coins, this is my first real paycheck. She said it was time for her to head out, or she'd be late, and Yusuk swore he'd keep going the same way so life could keep overflowing with abundance. By noon, the whole place had gone dead and lifeless. He felt his stomach refuse him on sight. He wouldn't even touch a meal for 20 lira, and when it all went quiet, the only one who finally bought something from him was that girl. He stared at his own rice crackers with curry like, yeah, I made this. They worked wonders and warmed you up and they cost 20 lira, yet Yusuk still couldn't believe it. What kind of businessman eats his own stuff? Then his stomach roared with hunger. He didn't just need food, he needed it now, so he grabbed a cracker and sank his teeth into it. He crunched a cracker, and right then it felt exactly like childhood, so it warmed him to the bone. Then he glanced at the second can, squid kebab, loaded with a tasty boost that sharpens his senses to spot the enemy. It looked amazing. It cost 30 lira. He popped one open, took a bite, and instantly felt that nostalgic hit. Yusuk swore it wasn't just tasty. It had real perks too, but it never got sold because there was no advertising. And honestly, he had zero sales experience, which didn't help one bit. Suddenly, he started hearing everyone around him crystal clear. His senses sharpened to terrifying precision, and that's exactly what squid shashlik does to you. Even the dryness in his mouth felt louder than anything, and when he spotted curry crackers and squid kebabs, he was just relieved he'd found a fountain fast, so he gulped water right away, and then he saw something that stopped him cold. He glanced to the side and spotted a tiny, run-down building, and the main character immediately figured it had to be a hotel. It was called the Bidokuro Safe House, and right away that name sounded like a trap. Then he stared at the price list and realized it was still way out of his reach. Yet the ruined, falling-apart building had to mean it was the cheapest they had. Yusuk figured tonight would be his night under the stars, but he still only had 20 lira, and when he saw the sun dropping, he turned around and headed straight back to the dungeon. He couldn't stop wondering if the girl who grabbed his gum was really okay, because she was down in the dungeon with her friend, trading blows with an elite slime. Her friend warned her that taking him down was way tougher than a regular one, so she had to tread carefully, and she snapped back that she already had it figured out. Physical hits won't do a thing, she'll have to add magic to the mix. She thrust her hand toward the enemy and unleashed her deadly triple shot. Then on the third beat, right when she had to land the hit, her strength simply ran out. She snapped to attention that the mister was over, and the two of them bolted away from the monster. Then her friend erupted into terrified screams, telling her this was exactly why she'd begged her to be careful. A friend told her she had to use a potion, and the girl snapped back that it'd be a shame to waste it on slugs. Then it hit her, the main character, and the stuff she'd bought from him. She fished out a pack of gum, shoved it toward her friend, snatched a piece for herself, chewed it down and went, seriously, this stuff is insanely tasty. She said she'd fought her way back to full strength and was ready to act again, and her friend pressed, is it really true? She only smiled, saying everything would be fine and it was time to push forward. Her cheeks flushed with that lively glow, like she'd powered up for real. Then she unleashed her crushing triple shot again and slammed it straight into the slime. As evening rolled in at the market by the dungeon, he stood there, watching everyone drift past, then spotted a crew of adventurers and figured they were already back from the grind, until someone called his name. It turns out it was the very same girl who'd bought gum from him, screaming at her friend to hurry up, while her friend shot back, where are you headed in all this rush? Yusuk clocked her right away and asked if she liked the gum. She grinned and said yes. It helped her tons. Her strength came roaring back, and she only had one thing on her mind, unleashing her killer triple attack. The girl said once the flavor faded, the restoration died with it. This gum chewed through its taste fast. Right then, her friend stepped in and greeted him too, and the girl introduced herself as Myra. Yusuk watched the customer hold up the paper on her palms and tell him she'd found this little scrap inside her bag. Then she added that another one was coming as a gift, and Yusuk couldn't help thinking it felt like a tiny lottery. The main character told her congratulations, then slid another pack of gum into her hands. She froze, stunned, and asked if he really meant it, and he nodded, yes. She snapped that she didn't like it at all. Then Yusuk leaned in and reminded her there were still permanent lottery tickets, and when she saw it cost only 10 lira, she couldn't ignore it. A chocolate coin that boosts her physical strength a little. The main character said this coin was chocolate, and the girl's jaw dropped. Only rich people could buy something like that, right? Then she leaned in and asked, so can I win the lottery? The girl asked if she could still score a chocolate bar, and he shot her down, telling her he was getting glasses instead. Then she leaned in and demanded to know what kind. Yusuk told her they could swap it at the shop for the exact same price as the goods, and the second he said it, a spark lit up in her eyes. She shoved a 10 lira coin into his hand and demanded he sell it to her. Then the girl leaned over the lottery, dead set on her pick. Myra snapped, asking what she was doing, and the girl blurted out exactly what she was choosing. Myra called it a stupid waste of money, and right then, the girl went and locked in her decision. She yanked the one thing she'd chosen and swore it was right, then bad luck hit hard. Myra stroked her head and whispered an apology because the girl was falling apart with how upset she was. Then her friend rushed up to the main character and begged for one more ticket. He grinned and nodded, and right then she got a coupon for 10 lira. Yusuk told Myra she could trade it for any item with 10 lira, and the girl immediately blurted, "So, is that awesome or a total trap?" The main character's customer leaned in and said the whole world worships Myra because she carries herself with pure dignity, though her friend whispered that Myra is secretly ashamed of the things she says. Then Maple snapped her gaze to the main character and declared she'd snag 3 lottery tickets, and Yusuk shot back that it would be 30 lira, only for her to miss it again. Out of nowhere, a bunch of adventurers barreled up to them and demanded answers. What was happening, why the girl was screaming, so she snapped, "Don't come closer, those are my tickets." Right when the main character tried to jump in, Merle suddenly called for 3 more tickets. Then one adventurer snapped, asking if he was really peddling those cheap candies, and his partner just shrugged and said they were pretty great. When the workday finally ended, he closed up, counted the profit, and chuckled. Merle's screaming had turned into the best kind of advertisement. And yeah, he figured ads mattered, because now he wouldn't have to sleep out in the open ever again. Right now, a beam-bright Merle clutched a coupon for 30 lira in her hands, and it was crystal clear just by looking at her how overjoyed she was. The protagonist beamed at her, convinced she'd given way more than she ever got back. Then, right in that moment, someone tapped Merle on the shoulder. Turns out the one behind it was her friend, Myra. She told her to come here tomorrow, and the girl snapped back, totally shocked. "Are you serious?" Myra immediately blushed and warned her not to get any ideas. Merle and Myra flashed sweet smiles and promised, "We'll be back tomorrow," and the main character grinned right back, saying, "I'll be waiting," and deep down, he could already feel it. His store was about to get its first real regulars. Merle leaned in and asked what his shop was called, and that question froze him for a second. Then he finally said, "It's Yahagi's pastry shop." The girl shot back the question about his name, and the main character told her, "It's Yusuk Yahagi." Then she stared and asked, "So it's really true?" before blurting out that it was a totally bizarre name and title. Myra's cheeks flared red. She blurted, "Sir," and Merle stared at the girl's figure, instantly thinking Yusuk was exactly her type, strange, but handsomely so. Night rolled in fast, streets swallowed by darkness, and the main character figured the sun had already vanished. Time to shut up shop, until something suddenly caught his eye. Merle leaned in and asked one of the adventurers what he'd found, and he told her they'd uncovered a witch long ago. Then Myra broke the truth open. That witch had cursed the king. The girl added that whoever tracks her down would be paid a massive 100,000 lira, and the main character nearly dropped from shock at that number. Myra said tons of adventurers were hunting the witch, but nobody could ever catch her. Then Yusuk shrugged and snapped, "I'm just a pastry chef, not my problem." And even though he tried to play it cool, you could tell that stung him a bit. Merle swore that one day she'd claim this award, and Myra snapped that this story has nothing to do with their fight against slime. So the main character nodded along, saying stable income is the real win. He swore he had nothing in common with anyone. Then life hit him with a curveball, whether it was his job or the people he never expected to meet. Right now, a band of armored people is sweeping the area, hunting the witch, and one guy demands, "Did you find her?" Only for the second to snap back, "She's around here." Meanwhile, an unseen girl watches their search wide-eyed. A brand new day dawned, and right at the dungeon entrance, new faces and street sellers showed up fast, pitching their wares and opening shop like it was showtime. Even the main character stepped in too, and once again, he kicked off the day with his opening skill. He hadn't even unlocked the shop door before the girls barreled up to him. Merle demanded 3 packs of gum, Myra grabbed for the biggest candy, and Yusuk was just smiling to himself because they were buying his stuff. Then a masked, fully kitted man strode up to the stall, and the protagonist immediately realized that Towel was snagged there early that morning for 500 lira, because only 420 lira sat in the stock. His name is Yusuk. After reincarnation, he threw open his own shop, survived one wild stretch after another, and somehow made it to the second day in this brand new world. Myra and Merle, his usual clients, were right there, and he clocked them fast. When Myra asked if he was a magician, he just shrugged and said the only trick he's got is opening things. The girl said this rare gift was spatial magic, and right then Merle blurted that she wanted to buy goods for 10 lira, then demanded they hand them back even faster. They told him he looked half dead with sleep, and he shot back, "I just didn't sleep right last night," because his face was pale and dark bruises sat under his eyes. After that, the girl waved goodbye and promised she'd be back in the evening, so he begged, "Come back alive." Merle scoffed that it was a terrifying wish, but Myra swore, "We'll return." A guy rolled up and asked Yusuk if he had any gum and rice crackers with curry, because they wanted to grab some, and fast. Yusuk greeted him, thinking, "Thanks to the girls, this is about to bring in even more regular customers." But Tagashi won't let him rake in cash fast. His morning haul was just 360 lira, and with that pittance, he still only managed to crash in that filthy cheap guest house. Now he's sitting on 780 lira left, and all he can think about is what happened last night. The protagonist slammed back into Botakuro's safe house, heart hammering, because he still couldn't shake how he'd even found it in daylight. Now, in the pitch dark, the place felt 10 times more cursed, and he couldn't stop wondering if he'd make it out alive. When he stepped inside, a woman greeted him and asked if he was really staying the night. He said yes, insisting he only needed one night, and she snapped back that it was 850 lira, breakfast included. Then the hostess stared back like a boar. She snapped at him to shut up at night or she'd toss him out, and even though it made him feel uneasy, he still nodded and agreed. Then she shoved him down the corridor to a door, swung it open, and announced, "This is your room." Inside was cramped, just one tiny bed, a nightstand with a lamp and a window. The hero expected something bigger, but this place felt surprisingly cozy. The woman smiled and said the crystal's magic inside the lamp would burn for 2 full hours, no need for any warning about leaving, because then she just turned around and left. Yusuk wasted no time. He crumpled under the blanket and tried to drift off, thinking he'd pack up and vanish. Then, out of nowhere, a cold chill started creeping in. He couldn't stop thinking about that chilling draft. Yeah, it was early spring in Japan, and the weather felt just like home, so he figured it had to be better than sleeping out in the wild. Morning hit, and Yusuk jolted awake only to realize he'd barely slept. So he clenched his resolve and decided to tighten his spending to finally move somewhere better. As evening rolled in, he snapped out of his memories and looked around. There stood the adventurers already on their way back, and Merle and Myra trailed in right behind them, utterly worn out. The protagonist demanded to know what happened, and Myra snapped that Merle got locked in a dungeon, and now a curse of dizziness is wrecking her. Merle blurted that she'd accidentally brushed a gargoyle statue, no fatal damage, but her head felt like it weighed a ton, and Yusuk instantly latched onto every word she said. He fired the question at them, asking if they had a cup and water with them, and Myra shot back, "Why?" before immediately demanding, "So, do you have an antidote?" He leaned in and said it wasn't totally true. He still had juice, grape powder juice with a dispersing kick. It cost 30 lira, but you had to dissolve it in 20 ml of water. He diluted it with water, shoved the glass into Merle's hands, and ordered her to drink. She took a few sips. A few moments later, Merle snapped back to life. She pushed herself upright, her face regained its color, she declared, "That was delicious," and then leaned in like, "Is there more?" Myra grinned at him and said it worked unbelievably well, then leaned in and asked if all 5 flavors hit the same. He just shook his head and said each flavor had its own effect. Then he told them, "Watch closely. Orange cleans you up. Strawberry cuts down the magical energy you burn. Melon boosts your experience by 1.2 times for 40 minutes, and pineapple cranks your profit to 2 times for 15 minutes. Merle opened her mouth to speak, but the main character cut in, saying it was getting hot, and then thrust an object into her hands, telling her to eat it. A few seconds later, that heat vanished and she finally felt better. Myra asked what it was, and the guy grinned, saying it was a cola with a soothing effect, then slapped down the price, 40 lira. Myra told Merle to always bring him along, saying life would get easier right beside him, and Yusuk shot back that she'd owe him 40 lira, so the girl just nodded and went along. By the very next day, he'd already raked in 3,000 lira. Today, the main character gets stuck in that same cheap house again. When the woman asks if he wants to stay the night, he says he just needs one room, and she tells him it's the exact one as yesterday. Right then, Yusuk's eyes locked onto something nearby. Then he realized it wasn't just trash at all, because the table was soaked in a huge stain, and he shot back, "Is that dirt?" The woman shot back that a brawl had gone down here, and she could put that man right in his place. So the protagonist panicked and realized he had to scramble for a safer spot to crash tonight. Next morning, he jumped out of bed early, hunting for a spot right near the dungeon entrance. While Yusuk kept spiraling over one thing, he had to grab money fast to secure a better place to stay. The protagonist cracked out his discovery skill once more. Then boom, his stall popped up, and he swore the missing pineapple juice that sold out was back again. Then he spun around, and there they were again, the goods reappearing right before his eyes. He snapped to it. His products were replenishing themselves. And hidden in his stuff, he spotted a lottery score, 1 rocket card, good for exactly 1 blast. Chuck it at a monster and the package detonates, and the more packages you toss in, the crazier the explosion gets. Each piece costs 50 lira. The main character blinked at those words about the magic of explosion, because to him, that power sounded terrifying and reckless. Then in Japan, the racket snapped shut with a brutal slam, roaring through the air. He was thinking if a pastry shop would even work when the girls rolled up to the stand. Merle grinned and said she also wanted more pineapple juice. Then she spotted the card and demanded to know what it was, and Yusuke leaned in and told her it was a rocket. The protagonist leaned in and asked Myra, "Is explosive magic dangerous?" And Myra shot back that it all came down to who was casting it, but if you used it offensively, it was brutally effective, and she couldn't use it herself. Then Yusuke pressed Merle and asked why she didn't try, and she shrugged that she just wanted juice. Myra, though, said she'd give it a shot right away. The hero pulled out 3 tiny rockets, shoved them into Myra's hands, and told her he figured she'd love them. Myra giggled with that sweet, bright laugh. Yusuke shot her a warning to stay sharp with those things, but she brushed him off and said she used magic items all the time. Then Merle chimed in, telling him they'd be meeting soon. After a bit, the girls came back, and Merle zoomed right into the main character's arms with a grin. He shot her a question, and she just said the pineapple juice was awesome, while Myra added that they'd pulled in way more than usual. Merle added that the missiles were basically a plague, 1 deadly bite. They clashed with a poisonous tooth, and boom, the monster got blasted away in a single hit, even though it didn't seem weak at all. She blurted that she wanted to try it too, and he shrugged, saying anyone could use the missiles, though they weren't as strong as the magic-seasoned adventure spellcasters wielded, and they only cost 50 lira. Then Merle took a shot at the lottery. She was chasing one dream, a rocket. But the universe laughed again, so she swore she'd keep trying until she finally won, and right then the main character snapped, "Drink cola." That same night, Yusuke slipped back into the same hotel again. She stared and asked if it was really him, and he pushed for another night, thinking this was just another cheap place where the sales were going up, but he still had to save. The woman told him he'd get a discount if he booked 5 nights all at once, but he shot it down and said no. Yet somehow afterward, he couldn't help thinking she'd turned a lot kinder. She told him in a hurry that a dangerously shady person was in the room next door today, and he'd better watch his step. Yusuke pressed her, asking if it was really a bandit, and she admitted it wasn't quite that simple from her 2 sources. She told him there's a man they call the Grim Reaper, and that rumors say he's slaughtered countless people, and the main character admitted it's terrifying. The guy blurted, "Why won't the guards catch me?" And the woman just shrugged like, "Because you don't know." Then she told him to wait, this was going to take forever, because she needed to make tea, and Yusuke instantly clocked it. She wasn't in a rush at all, she was bored out of her mind. He started daydreaming about baking sweets for tea, unlocked his shop, and pulled out chocolate dorayaki, 2 pieces in the pack, and that second one's meant to be split with a friend, so you get even closer. Yusuke couldn't stop replaying that moment, like it was pulling him closer by the second, wondering if he should step in with this woman. But with how he'd learned, the gashi always hits exactly as hard as you pay for, so too much would just waste it. The moment the woman came back, he leaned in and asked, "Did you like the sweets?" She nodded and said they were delicious. Then she turned around and asked if he really sold them. The woman leaned in and asked how much he was charging, and Yusuke snapped back, 30 lira. She said it was a steal, grabbed 10 of them right there, and Yusuke just smiled, because somehow it turned into real sales. He took the tea she brought and swore it tasted like hojicha and black tea tangled together. Then he fired back, asking why the authorities wouldn't crush criminals. She just smiled and said it was all about a story. The best generals and soldiers get slammed onto the border, and all that's left is the pathetic wreckage of once great warriors. Yusuke can only think, I should have laid off the sweets, and I'm not that far from where I want to go. The woman leaned in and asked if he realized the country was at war right now. Then the protagonist grinned innocently like he had no clue at all. She also told him that, on top of all that, a royal curse was hanging over everything, and when he asked if it was truly a witch's curse, she nodded and said yes. Long ago, the king was promised to a famous witch named Michelle, but their engagement shattered, and he demanded answers. She told him the cruel truth. The moment it happened, the king had fallen headfirst for the current queen. The queen was pure, bewitching beauty, and the king, yeah, he probably couldn't resist her charm, because he was just a typical man until the witch's rage exploded, and she cursed her for it. Ever since the king walked away from state affairs, this city's security has gone from bad to worse. guards won't act on rumors, and at that point, the protagonist was already gearing up to break the engagement. Yusuk insisted that Michelle the witch had to be ridiculously cute. Those words hit the woman like a slap. She looked mortified and snapped that she shouldn't say stuff like that. Criminals might slip away, but if you dare cross the royal family, you don't just get punished, you get thrown into prison. Right on the stairs, the main character suddenly caught a sound off to the side. He snapped his head toward her and told the woman he thought he heard something. Then he asked if they were really being followed, only for her to fire back that he hadn't even listened to her before. That woman snapped that she didn't care who her guests were, but warned him to watch that guy. He could be deadly. Then Yusuk nodded like, "I've got it." When he finally stumbled into his room, he flopped onto the bed, pulled the blanket over himself, and the moment his eyes closed, he knew sleep was never coming. He couldn't shake the feeling someone was staring at him. Would anyone really think he was the bad one? And then he caught it, a grim reaper lurking behind that thin wall. If he nodded off, would it drag him away? But the real problem was simple. He desperately needed the toilet, and that urge kept him from ever getting any sleep. The toilet sat in the yard, right across from the stairs outside the Reaper's room, and he couldn't stop wondering if this burning need would be the thing that killed him. So instead of fearing death, he chose to meet it with honor. So he decided to take care of business. Only when he stepped into the corridor, he spotted the Reaper's room door hanging wide open. He crept closer, knowing damn well curiosity would ruin him, and yeah, he felt it, but he just couldn't stop. As soon as he shut the door, he froze. Women's underwear lay on the bed, and the bra size was absolutely huge. He figured the Reaper was either secretly a lingerie designer or just had a bizarre hobby, and either way, that thing was still straight-up dangerous. The main character finally cracked the solution, then he swore he saw nothing at all. Right after that, he burst into the toilet and went, "Yes." Right after he finished, his stomach growled, so he whipped out his opening skill and grabbed a chocolate dorayaki, but right before his bite, someone demanded to know if it was his product. Yusuk dropped his goods on the ground and blurted that he was a street vendor showing off his product, but he hadn't even finished the line before his customer snapped, asking if those were really sweets. He spun around and there, standing right in front of him, was the Reaper. His nerves spiked, but he somehow blurted, "Want some sweets?" The Reaper chuckled, and Yusuk couldn't believe it. He was really sharing candy with the god of death. The Grim Reaper took the sweet offering, tasted it, and grinned. "This is delicious." Right then, the protagonist realized he just heard a girl's voice, until the Reaper snapped in and said, No, it's delicious." He even quizzed, "So these are all sweets?" And without hesitation, he picked the treats and paid for them. Yusuk asked the death god if he really liked sweets, and the guy snapped back that he didn't, right while he clutched a mountain of candy in his hands. Chocolate dorayaki, 10 lira, then a huge chocolate candy, 10 lira. The Grim Reaper racked up purchases in his store for 1,000 lire, and when the guy asked if he really lived in that hotel, the main character just smirked. "Yeah, sometimes it happens." Then the Grim Reaper spun around and bade him farewell. Yusuk gasped, thinking he'd made it, and realized it was time to go back to the room. At the same time, the Grim Reaper in his room tore off every piece of clothing and armor, only to reveal a girl with long hair, grinning because she'd finally worked up the courage to talk to him, and even brought sweets. As the girl wrestled with the situation, she suddenly burst into giggles, and the main character, sprawled on the bed, just smugly decided he was going to survive for sure. A fresh new day dawned, and Yusuk rushed to his favorite spot. He used his opening move, only to freeze when he saw his shop had changed. The upgrades weren't random, they tracked how high his sales went. The main character declared, "Everything's finally crystal clear to me," and now he's ready to show off his goods, using boxes too, and even the list of items has exploded bigger. Then the girls sprinted up to him. Merle jumped in to ask about new products. Myra greeted him with a bright "good morning," and Yusuk grinned and said he had monster chips before offering them a taste, and just like that they agreed. Then the protagonist yanked out a stone golem card, one that summoned a moving statue, 2.5 meters tall, with powers like suppression and a brutal stone wall. Mirrorless blinked in shock when that card showed an E-rank ear, because it could smash enemies in attack mode or lock down defenses in the next moment. Yusuk didn't waste time, calling it awesome, then turned to Merle and asked what she'd gotten. She was fuming as she stared down her card. "I got slime again," and the main character groaned, "Not you too, you're cursed with bad luck again." Yusuk leaned in and asked Myra if she wanted to make some extra cash, and she tilted her head, all sweet charm, asking him what she'd have to do. She held up an object and told her, "This has to be frozen." It was an apricot stick, sliced apricot packed in syrup and chilled, so one bite would ignite courage in her chest. Myra told him she didn't have ice magic, then quickly apologized. He waved it off and said everything was fine. Inside his head, he thought those frozen sticks were basically sherbet and way better, and just then the Grim Reaper slid up to them, offering his help. He only meant to say hi, but the moment he saw who was coming his way, his words vanished, total silence. Yusuke threw his body in front of the girls so they were out of sight, then greeted him, only for the Reaper to demand the magic, and the main character nodded like he'd do it, right up until he admitted he had zero money. Meanwhile, the Grim Reaper worked for free, no cash, no begging. Then, just a few moments later, his magic snapped and froze the apricot sticks solid. He figured maybe he wasn't so awful after all, so he offered to at least take the chopsticks, nodded like it was settled, then turned away and started eating. Then the Grim Reaper snapped his gaze back to him and said he wanted to buy 10 pieces, leaving Yusuke thinking, so he really likes it. The Grim Reaper started scanning the protagonist's stall, and every person who walked past got scared and kept their distance. Yusuke couldn't help thinking about when he'd finally get to leave. Then he told himself he'd been honest, and that he'd stocked the place with plenty. He spun toward the girls and demanded, "Is it true I'm killing people?" And Merle shot back that she'd watched him do it, even said she'd seen him kill 10. Merle swore he's a sword master, then sliced a 2-meter snake into chunks. Myra fired up that he also slings second-order magic, and honestly, watching it is pure insanity. Yusuke wondered if it was finally time to take on a tougher dungeon. Why waste your talents here for nothing? Myra had no clue how to answer. Merle clocked the Grim Reaper staring right at her, and her mind instantly panicked, like why her? Then she realized with horror it wasn't fate, it was her charm, and yeah, that's a sin. When their eyes locked, the Grim Reaper didn't so much as twitch. She thought he was straight up ignoring her, until it hit her. The sweets her brother had were the real magnet. Myra and Merle told him they were going, and Merle's words hit him hard. He couldn't believe the Grim Reaper was showing up too. Night rolled in, the apricot sticks melted into a sad mess, but Yusuke shrugged like it didn't matter. At this hour, barely anyone was around. A girl in a hat slid up to him, smiled, greeted him, and demanded more rockets. Then the main character nodded and agreed. Yusuke said the place felt empty today, and then she shot back that a witch had been spotted nearby, so he pressed, "Did you really see Michelle?" Right then, the girl froze at the news about winning the third prize, and he immediately leaned in and congratulated her. She grinned and asked how to grab those monster chips she'd spotted at Merle's, and he instantly figured they'd be a total hit. In the end, he scores the sweets for free, so he doesn't have to fork over a single coin, though part of him still hears that guy with glasses saying he won't sell. And yeah, it's a seriously tricky situation. Right then, a voice snapped him out of his daydream. Turning out it was the Grim Reaper himself, standing there, and Yusuke greeted him. The latter leaned in and demanded what name the protagonist went by, and Yusuke's nerves snapped tight, because he never saw this coming. The Reaper was trying to say his name. So the guy finally blurted out that his name was Minerva, then jabbed his finger at the card and demanded that orange. The main character leaned in and asked if he really wanted orange juice since the guy was poisoned, and the Reaper just replied, like it was no big deal, while he pictured the Reaper's face covered in scars. Then Yusuke pulled out a glass of water, grinned, and said it would help right as he started pouring the powder in. Miranda lunged to stop him, but he just waved her off and insisted everything was okay. Then the main character started dousing the Grim Reaper himself with water, and even behind that mask you could tell he blushed at what he was being forced to endure. Yusuke even asked if this juice actually helped him, and he shot back with a clear yes. After a while, the main character started wondering if Minerva was a female name, or if here, it's just the kind of name men carry on their signboards, and then he spotted it, a brand new product. That scratch card blasts a random stat boost, locked in for 12 hours, and if you're lucky, it also adds an extra bonus, plus the gum will set you back 30 lira. The main character figured that kind of product would be perfect for his gambling adventures, and man, Japanese stores were packed with tons of awesome stuff like that. Right then, Garm stormed up to him, greeted him with a grin, and said he was craving curry rice balls. He was a young adventurer and a regular, the kind of good guy you can trust. His party assistant hovered right beside him, and Yusuke said he hoped he'd find something too. Then the guy stepped in, introduced himself, and told him it was great to meet him. Regal bragged that he was brand new, then told the protagonist he'd heard this place was packed with cheap stuff for 10 lira. So the protagonist nodded along, figuring his shop was basically for newbies who couldn't splash the cash. Right then, Myra and Merle barreled up to them, and Merle, smirking, asked if the goods were really piling up more and more, before saying it was cool. Myra shot back a good morning, and Merle and Garm traded greetings. Yusuke shoved the map into their hands and said, "Scrape this spot with a coin. If it comes off, you've won. But there's a catch. You only win when you land 3 matching pictures." Garm leaned in and asked if it was really just 30 lira, then declared he had to try. Merle chimed in that she'd take it too, until the protagonist stopped her cold and ordered, "Drink a cola first." The adventurer started rubbing the layer off the card, and there it was, 3 identical pictures. He grinned and called it cool, while Yusuk shrugged like, yeah, stuff like this happened all the time. Garm ended up with 3 identical pictures, and then a magic beam ripped from the card straight to the guy's chest. He had no clue what was happening. A few seconds later, Garm grinned and said he felt way more confident. Then the protagonist confirmed it would last 12 hours, told him to rush to the dungeon, and the guy shot back a quick thank you. The protagonist remembered Merle had grabbed one of these cards too, spun toward her, and saw 3 wild, totally different pictures staring back. Merle mumbled that she was a loser, but he fired back, trying to prove she was. The girl shoved over another coin and told him she needed 1 more scrap of paper. Yusuk grinned and wished her luck, and Myra leaned in, urging him to chase it with a cola. Merle told her that the witch hanging around the lower floors wasn't just talk, she was real, and she wanted to sharpen her skills, but Myra nodded and warned, "At our current level, we don't stand a chance." The main character demanded where the witch was hiding in that dungeon, and Myra snapped back. They swear she was spotted on the 3rd level, then she got hit by a poisoned arrow and still slipped away. Yusuk chewed on her words, then let out a low chuckle, wondering if that arrow really was poisoned, and just how long ago it had been fired. He blurted out to the girls, "Do you know what she looks like?" And Merle fired back that her portraits were hanging right in front of the castle. Right then, fresh customers swept up to his counter. One guy claimed Garm sent him, said he'd bought cards here, and asked for candy and cola, and Yusuk just sighed like, "Of course, the new batch is back again." The protagonist shoved his purchases into the adventurer's hands, then grinned to himself, give it a little time, and he'd finally live normally off the store's profits. After he finished dealing with the morning customers, he'd go shopping next. After a while, Yusuke headed to the shop and snagged himself a leather backpack, big enough for an adventurer, because if he can't keep the store open, he'll need to stash all the essentials right there. He grabbed a bargain blanket from a second-hand shop, because Batakuro nights bite hard, then started his morning with veggie soup for 150 lira, and a big sausage that cost 30 to 50 lira. Now that he's got more money in his pocket, he can finally grab everything he needs and sit down for a real breakfast. Then the truth hits. He blew most of it on his backpack, so he's left with only 3,000 lira. After what felt like forever, he finally reached the Royal Palace Square, way bigger and way cleaner than the one outside the dungeon. And right in front of him, a notice board waited. As he closed the distance, he spotted a wanted poster for a witch named Michelle, then looked at her and blurted that she was cute. Right then, the stranger standing beside him cut in, asking if he really meant it. Turns out a Grim Reaper had shown up right beside him, and the Reaper snapped, "What are you doing here?" Yusuk swallowed and said he'd come because the guys were chatting about a witch he couldn't stop thinking about. Then he caught himself thinking, "I'm not scary, right?" The protagonist choked out that he was terribly sorry for the witch, and right then Minerva's eyes flared to life, like something about what he just said might have been risky, even after the warning. Right then that gloomy kid started acting weird, shame creeping across his face, as he blurted, "Do you really think that? Am I actually that good?" Yusuk snapped, "What are you talking about?" The main character said he figured it might be different if he got to know her better, because then she wouldn't feel so terrifying, at least not to him. Still, something about the Reaper's attitude felt off, but honestly, this turned out better than expected. The Grim Reaper was ready to spin a tale, so Yusuk raided the snack stash, grabbing Carol's chocolate to bring smiles, paid 20 lira for it, and then shoved one piece into the Grim Reaper's hands. Yusuk grilled the witch, asking why nobody liked her, and the guy shrugged that people craved bright, happy girls, and the sexier type too. Yusuk shot back that yeah, he found her pretty damn sexy, she just looked exhausted. Minerva leaned in and grilled him, did he really like her? Then she casually complimented her nice, high butt, and Yusuk shot back that if she smelled even better, that was the real win. And inside his head, he could only ask, what kind of conversation is this? The main character asked if he'd ever run into witches, and the guy admitted he had, once upon a time. So then the guy leaned in and asked if he liked them, and the Reaper snapped back that those people were nothing but dangerous. Minerva bit into the chocolate and snapped, "Wait, this is strawberry." Yusuk laughed and told him there were 4 flavors, strawberry, caramel, milk, and pistachio. The Reaper demanded he sell him every single one, then leaned in and asked, "What's your name?" Yusuk Yahagi blurted his name, and the Grim Reaper's eyes flared again as he echoed it back. Yasuk figured it might be the chocolate, and then boom, things turned warmer fast, their talk getting freer and more honest. He even said he was happy with the shopping, but stuffing himself with sweets would wreck him, and the Reapers just answered, "Nope, you can't stop." Minerva leaned in and asked what he loved to eat, and the boy said he was all about chicken and fruit, even though he had no real favorites. She nodded like she got it, then snapped the talk right back to witches. The Grim Reaper quizzed Yusuk about whether he really found that witch cute, and Yusuk shot back that it was all personal taste and insisting that meeting her in person was the real move, while in his own head, he couldn't stop wondering why he was being so damn persistent. After a while, the main character tore back into the dungeon and froze, so many people packed inside. Right then, he heard someone shouting, "Make way," because a guy had smashed up his leg, and they all begged for healing magic. Yusuk stared at Regal's face and spotted the brutal wounds, and everyone was already whispering that he was bleeding out. No way he'd make it to the hospital in time, so the thought hit him, maybe there's chocolate that can jack up his strength. Right then, the Grim Reaper swept in, and he told them something terrible had happened when the main character shouted his name. Yusuk shot him a question, "Do you have bandages?" Pushed hard that he really needed them, and Minerva snapped back, "I don't have any, but I can heal that wound." The guy swore at first, then snapped back with, "Okay, do you have bandages now?" After a while, the Grim Reaper snapped into action with his magic, and the wound closed instantly. The main character stared, asking if he could really do that because it was insanely cool. The Reaper just got flustered, all embarrassed by the praise. Regal loomed in front of them, face still aching, and he thanked the Grim Reaper like it saved his life, while Yusuk couldn't stop replaying what went down in the dungeon. The protagonists swore it was obvious, but the dungeon proved them wrong. This place was deadly. So tell me, did Merlin Myra really walk into that nightmare every single day? A few days later, right by Sane Square in the dungeon, the main character hauled his stall into place. Then Merle pulled a Ghost Knight card. Her rank hit and Myra basically went, "Are you kidding? That's a huge win for you, Merle." The girl blurted that today is one of the happiest days of her life, and she's dying to turn it on. Too bad it's impossible. It's only a talisman for her, and right then Yusuk stared at it like it was his lucky day, but everything about his luck felt cursed. He's struggling to sell a single thing, then they smash his stall, crack the window, and he's left handing out more change than he can spare, all while he can only think about when this nightmare will finally end. The girl urged her to try the chocolate lottery. She was desperate to win, and Yusuk shot back that she never gives up. Then, right at that moment, something caught his eye. Turns out soldiers flooded into the square, and the main character's body went rigid, because he realized this wasn't the kind of trouble you'd ignore after he called the witch sweet. Right then, the men demanded every seller get their license plates ready, because they were about to run a full license check. He froze at their words, stunned out of his mind, and then the license plate hit him like a truck. What was the point of it? Did this world seriously require a license just to sell things? Because he sure didn't have one. Yusuk fretted that everything was falling apart. Should he throw in the towel and bolt? But he wouldn't risk doing anything illegal in front of the normal customers, so when one of the soldiers stepped up and demanded his token, he had to deal with it head-on. His hands shook with pure nerves, but he forced out, "I'm so sorry, I didn't have it," and even that confession felt brutal to get out. Then the man demanded, "How long have you really been at this?" Yusuk snapped back, 8 days. The soldier smirked and threatened, "Prove it, or we'll throw you in prison." Panic hit the guy like a truck. But when the man heard the truth, he snapped that all he'd hand out was a fine, and Yusuke needed a license, no excuses, if he wanted to keep running business in this city. Yusuke nodded right along, then let out a long, shaky breath. Once the man was gone, Merle leaned in and told him flat out that she never expected such naive ignorance, since he was out there running a business without a license, and he snapped back that he was only new in the city. Merle said he looked dead serious. Myra backed him up and then teased that he could be so stupid sometimes. It was still totally cute, though. Her friend pressed if she meant it, and Myra nodded, dead set on yes. Merle stared at her friend and thought, "You really believe Myra's got a gift for producing useless men?" Right then the main character demanded, "How much is the license?" And after that fine, there was basically nothing left in his wallet. Myra answered fast, "If my memory's right, it's around 12,000 lira for trading." Yusuke was stunned. He demanded the price again, then admitted he only had 4,200 lira left, and Myra snapped that this was a disaster. The main character figured he still had enough money for the night, but if he couldn't land the deal, he'd be dead here eventually. Merle told him he was lucky she was kind. She told them there was only one spot in the whole city where you could make a deal without a license, and Myra nodded like she'd heard it before. Then Yusuke leaned in and demanded where it was, and the girl just pointed her finger straight down. The main character snapped back that he couldn't do that here, and the guy got hit with a fine. Merle then fired back, "I meant underground." The guy's answer came instantly. He'd never set foot down there. Yusuke asked if they really meant for him to trade in the dungeon, and the girls nodded hard, then told him to go in, making him wonder if he'd actually have the guts to do it. Michelle stood at the window with a spread of dishes in front of her, humming a tune with rosy cheeks, and she'd already packed a bento box. Then the girl dressed up and nearly slipped out, but she froze. She'd forgot her mask. In the corridor, she ran into the one man she didn't want to miss, and he tried to step in, then stopped dead in his tracks. The Grim Reaper stared at him like pure fury, so the man blurted out how terrifying it was, then bolted for his life. The Reaper figured he must have been trying to apologize. A brand new day broke, early morning, and the whole scene was set by the dungeon entrance as the girls rushed up to the main character and shouted, "Good morning." Yusuk was freaking out, shaking like crazy. Then Merle burst into laughter and demanded, "Why are you so nervous?" And Yusuk finally admitted it was his first dungeon. Merle grinned and promised she wouldn't dive into the witch's depths. She'd wipe every monster off the floor. And Yusuk just laughed, saying she was basically a walking beauty. He thinks no license means I can't sell sweets by the dungeon, but inside the dungeon it's apparently fine, so he decides to sneak in, and the worry still gnaws at him. They slipped inside, and Yusuk's eyes widened. The walls were glowing like a pulse, like you could step into a subway entrance straight into that same dungeon vibe, and at the entrance it looked identical. Myra pointed out that this staircase had exactly 60 steps. She kept her promise, took Merle to a place where he could do business, then thanked him for the sweets, while Merle told her to enjoy them and said they were 30 lyres each. Then they finally went down. The main character said it would be amazing to keep doing business anywhere, and Myra nodded, admitting you can't trade near the entrance without a license, while Merle warned that even adventurers would grumble about the chaos and the lawlessness. Myra blurted out that the dungeon itself was waking up, and Merle snapped at him to hang on, so as they dropped deeper, he kept spinning around, searching the walls. Merle kept giggling at him, and then she told him how hard he'd been trying, because from here to their destination, there were 2 zones to cross, and Myra practically breathed a sigh of relief that there were no monsters around. He thanked the girls and promised them their favorite sweets, and just like that, Merle snatched up the chip monsters right away, while Yusuk bowed his head and apologized, saying he didn't grab any because he'd only picked out what he considered truly necessary. Merle's expression snapped instantly, tears sprang to her eyes, because the main character begged her, "Don't look at me like that, it could get us killed here." He figured that since he couldn't finish those chips, he'd hand them over to Badokuro's owner, and sure enough, she lit up with joy, even though it felt like the gap between them shrank again. Inside that pack, he dug up a priceless map, pure gold. He figured it might help him later. The girls said they were heading out, and he told them to stay safe, then asked them to look after themselves too. They promised to come back by evening. When he spun around, he spotted a handful of people, so he flashed a grin and introduced himself. Yahagi, the sweet seller. Murai said she sold restorative tea, and Senaga revealed she was a blacksmith. Right there, the man caught a strange sound in the air. Then Yusuk snapped, "What's happening?" And his fresh acquaintances blurted that monsters were closing in, forcing them to scramble for a plan fast. The protagonist figured this chaos was coming, but he clutched his map like it could save him. Then 4 goblins materialized right in front of them. Yusuk felt the moment was right, so he slammed the summon monster card. Right in front of them, a rank C goblin materialized, the kind of easy pick even beginners can manage, and he instantly clocked the terrifying truth. His monster was the only one. But the main character snapped, decided it wasn't scary at all, then told his monster to start putting on a show. He dropped that first goblin with just a few brutal hits, and everyone erupted yelling about how insanely strong he was. Yusuk just grinned and said, "Yeah, you're good, now go handle the rest." His monster was swarmed by 3 goblins, and the protagonist instantly felt like there had to be more, so instead of hesitating, he summoned another monster, a feathered piranha, then a fairy pixie. After a while, his monsters finished off the last goblins, and Yusuk rubbed his forehead, stunned at how in the world he'd actually pulled off the win. Senaga admitted he was shocked there were 4 of them, and the protagonist asked if that really counted as weird. Mariah explained that normally only one steps out of the fog. Yusuk thanked the goblin, then it vanished, because 3 minutes had already slid by since the summoning. His friends shoved the gold and magic crystals into his hands, and Yusuk finally got it. This is how they cash in inside the dungeons. The main character asked, "Can I share?" And the guy shot back, "I'm the winner, so it's your call, and if that's the case, don't hold back." After the deal, he hauled in 200 lira from the 4 goblins, and Senaga broke it down. 1 magic crystal would cost about 10 lira. Then Yusuk's mind raced when he realized the whole haul added up to 240 lira. Murai admitted it was terrifying, then practically sighed with relief that the summoner was there, only for him to brush it off like, "I'm just a pastry chef." Then the girl blurted, asking if he really meant confectionery magic, and right then, the adventurers she already knew came stomping into the dungeon like, "We never expected you'd open a shop down here." He stood there and greeted them. With his opening skill ready, The protagonist grinned and asked them what sweet they wanted this time, and they called for 10 lira, 4 pieces, of squid on a stick. He just couldn't stop smiling because he loved his job. It was midday and he couldn't believe how calm it all felt, so he spun to his acquaintances and demanded, "Are you guys really still working right now?" They just laughed and said, "Our real work hasn't even kicked off yet." Right then the Grim Reaper dropped in, spun toward the main character, and demanded, "Are you really here?" before revealing he'd come hunting for him. Yusuk demanded to know if Minerva was really hunting him down, and Minerva snapped his gaze away and said he was just wandering the square, like he had no clue at all. Then the Reapers looked mortified and offered, "Hey, if you want, we can eat together," and right after that, he set a bento box down in front of him. When the box popped open, Yusuk's eyes lit up. There was a chicken and bacon sandwich packed with lettuce and tomatoes, plus a fruit platter for dessert. He even asked if it was really possible, and the Reaper just laughed and admitted he'd somehow made way more than he could ever finish. The main character snatched the sandwich right away, tore into it, and declared it was insanely tasty, like he could cook in his sleep. So Minerva leaned in and asked if he truly meant it. The Grim Reaper started trembling with pure delight and purred that it was delicious. Yusuk instantly felt that familiar, "it's happening again" vibe, and it made his stomach tighten with nerves. The protagonist offered to grab him some tea, then spun to Mariah and demanded, "Can you spare me a cup?" She flinched at the Reaper but still nodded. Then Minerva leaned in, snapped, "What are you doing?" and warned him off talking to any other girls. The Grim Reaper snapped that he'd been tricked by a mature woman's charm, and when Yusuk stared at him, he couldn't help thinking, maybe he just hadn't eaten enough. After a while, the girls came back, and Merle wasted no time. She said tomorrow they'd dig even deeper and open the store farther in. Down in the basement, right by the stairs, there's a huge room with plenty of space to set everything up, and Yusuk couldn't stop replaying every word. The girl said this is where adventurers kick back and relax, and she's certain you'll be able to earn more there. Then the main character asked where they should go, and Myra just smiled and said, "Don't worry, we'll take you there." Right then, a Grim Reaper materialized behind Myra, and Myra warned, "The girl who flirts with the main character when he's in a good mood, he'll cut her down." Merle challenged the protagonist to go deeper, and he snapped back a resolute, "Yes." Morning rolled in, the girls looked wiped out, and they pushed out a tired, sweet good morning. Right then the Grim Reaper materialized beside them and grinned like it was destiny. "What a coincidence," he said. Yusuk shot back, "So you're really here," and the Reaper nodded, claiming their fates were somehow tangled up the same way. Together they slipped into the dungeon, and the protagonist swore he only had 2 more floors before the next point, until he saw the passage was way wider than he expected. Merle leaned in and said, "Sometimes this place gets packed." The Grim Reaper leaned in and asked if they'd dragged him to the break room so he could do whatever he wanted. Merle fired back that it was to open a store, and Yusuk couldn't shake the feeling that the Grim Reaper had been acting way too weird lately. Merle said, "They're here, this is the restroom," and the protagonist blurted, "Whoa, it's huge." His thoughts raced. This didn't look like a bathroom, it looked like a mansion banquet hall. Then he unleashed his opening skill. A huge tent shot up right in front of him, with a counter sitting beside it, and he couldn't believe it. Somehow he'd actually leveled up that much. Merle leaned in and asked what it said, and Yusuk told her it was the store's name, though she squinted at the weird spelling and suddenly got hooked by one of the products. Turns out there's a slot machine hiding in the mix, where you have to fling 10 coins along the rim, right by the lever, and if you reach the 7th basement floor, boom, your prize shows up, but you can only play with 10 coins at a time, and yeah, it looks incredible. The main character couldn't shake the feeling that it costs more than the Japanese ones. Maybe the price is doing all this magic, like the prize is a cure-all. Yusuk asked Myra if it was a good reward, and Myra lit up. "Are you kidding? It's incredible. This is worth at least 1 nils in lira, and even advanced adventurers rarely ever get to see something like this." Merle heard that and pressed for more, then said she had to win, so the main character wished her good luck. Yusuk told her she was doing fine, and she grinned back that everything wasn't a matter of luck. If she had a shot, it was because she was genuinely talented. Merle kept slamming into this game again and again, and every single time she failed. While the main character tried to explain her money, it felt like she simply didn't hear a word he said. Just then she whipped around and spotted a whole crowd of adventurers behind her, offset. She told them, loud and clear, that it was time to move on, and Yusuk urged them to take care of themselves. Nightfall hit the dungeon, and when the last customers finally drifted out, he waved them off with a grin and wished them pleasant dreams. Then he couldn't wait to shut the doors and bolt home. Today's take was 40-20 lira. Then he snapped back to the machine and realized Merle was the only one making headway right now. Since he owned it, he could jump in too, but he needed coins first. He believed that in his past life, a man had taught him how to play, and the panacea that came with it wasn't a miracle at all, just a sweetness he hadn't expected, something like it would be in a bottle. The protagonist knew this dungeon was a death trap, but he had to have it, so he threw himself at it, and day after day, his daily sales kept climbing as he pushed for the win. You should keep working right here at the shop, because the regulars are absolutely thrilled. Then, right in that moment, his loyal customers sprint straight up to him. The Grim Reaper showed up and asked him straight up if he was going home. Yusuke admitted he was scared for his safety, but since the girls were there, he was hoping they'd let him tag along, and he even called the Reaper kind. The protagonist asked if there was another hidden spot, and Merle snapped, "What happened?" So he admitted he needed to win the panacea, but if he started shouting in the hotel, they'd kick him out. Then the girl said, "Just do it on the street," and he snapped back, "No way, you'll get robbed." Right then the Grim Reaper handed him a house like it was nothing, and the girls instantly blushed and looked away. Yusuke hesitated and asked, "Is it really yours?" The Reaper nodded. He'd rented one just the other day. Then Yusuke perked up and asked if he could play, and the Reaper answered with a firm, eager yes. Minerva told him to just sit down for dinner with him, and then he could do whatever he wanted afterward. The protagonist snapped back that he was taking this way too seriously, and the Reaper shrugged. He wasn't pushing an agenda, he just wanted to help his friend. Yusuke flashed a sweet smile and promised he'd make it happen. Then the girls instantly froze, cheeks burning with pure embarrassment. And at that exact moment, Michelle couldn't tell if this was a dream, because the main character was coming to her home, and she was just so happy she didn't back away as she grabbed him by the shoulders, driven by pure love in the end. She panicked, thought, "I can't just tell him I'm Michelle the witch, so I'll have to love him in secret." The protagonist tells you he snatched adventurer clothes from the stall right outside the dungeon, because his old outfit can't fit him in this place anymore. Then he picked a place close to the house, convinced the dungeon business was finally booming, so booming he'd be out of Bodokuro any day now, until she snapped around to the Grim Reaper and asked, "Do you've got heating?" And he grinned, "Yeah, I do." Yusuke figured today would be spent staying with his first buddy in this new world, so he grilled the Reaper, "Do you drink?" And the second the answer landed, he offered to bring some over. He was over the moon, telling everyone they finally had wine, and he couldn't wait for the evening to hit. Meanwhile, Mitchell's mind raced with what he planned to do next. Right then, Merle and Myra were lurking in the shadows, staring at them, and they were convinced it was totally a date. Myra leaned in and asked her friend if men really had relationships like that, and the girl shot back that it was exactly how it played out in the novel she'd been counting. The girls kept chasing them, then they rounded the corner and bam, the main character and the Reaper were gone. They gasped, sure they'd lost them for good. Right then, the Grim Reaper ushered him back home. Yusuke said it felt way too quiet, and Minerva shrugged that it was just their blocking magic. The protagonist asked, "Can I come in?" And the guy smiled, calling it such a nice place. Then the Grim Reaper shot back, "It could be even better," and the protagonist insisted he not play it down. Yusuke blinked, stunned that a bathroom even existed here, and the Reaper just shrugged. He said Yusuke could take it if he wanted, then immediately asked what he felt like eating. Then Michelle pictured the main character heading into his bathroom as blood poured from her nose, and Yusuke snapped, asking if she was really vomiting blood, then told her to hold on. The Reaper shot him an apology, admitted his power got out of control, and insisted he was okay. Then Yusuke just stared and said, "Yeah, but you don't look great." Minerva insisted he was fine. His power just showed up sometimes, like it had a mind of its own, and the main character couldn't shake the question. Was that really what a magician was supposed to do? The Reaper ordered him to take a bath while he cooked, and he flat out refused to let the Reaper step into the kitchen while the food was on. Michelle's mind raced at the idea of what she could do for you, Suke, and then her nose started bleeding like crazy. All right, time to rip off the mask and try. She spun her dancing blade desert barrier technique like a dance, turning her skills into a blazing cookfire, because her best magic is pure love, and yeah, those love games are seriously amazing. Michelle pictured Yusuke standing right in front of her, felt that jolt of excitement, and still couldn't believe how handsome he was, because now all she can think about is wanting to touch him right this second. The main character offered his help, and the Reaper told him to go play while he waited. Then he finally said, "Wait, this is why I came," like it all just hit him, and he completely forgot. Yusuke figured he could finally summon only what he truly needs, so today he burst into Minerva's house to steal his shot at that elixir, praying luck is on his side. After a while, the main character finally sat down to eat, and the table was stacked with grilled lamb on the bone with mustard, lobster mousse, and rich red wine. Yusuke grinned that it looked downright delicious, and the Reaper chimed in that even dessert was coming. Then Yusuke told Minerva he wouldn't eat unless she took off her mask, and he just stood there, waiting to finally see her face. But under that mask, there was yet another one, and the Reaper admitted it. He casts magic to swallow his real face so nothing can go wrong. They clinked plates and wished each other bon appetit, and Yusuk grinned, saying it was delicious. He was stuffed, and the Reaper lit up at every word. Michelle tossed and turned, convinced she couldn't sleep. He had spoiled her all day, and now she wouldn't even let him out of the house. She felt like she couldn't live without him, like she could build an endless hallway where he'd never escape. Then she suddenly understood, if she kept doing this, he'd come to hate her. And when Yusuk heard her whining, he just assumed it was cats fighting. A brand new day dawned. Then the main character jerked his eyes open and froze, because the Grim Reaper was right there, looming over him with his body bent down toward his face. Yusuk shot up out of bed. The Reaper grinned and said, "Good morning." Then Yusuk snapped, "What are you doing here?" and admitted he'd been watching the Reaper sleep. The main character stared at the diagrams laid out before him as the Reaper warned, "It's an endless corridor," and the guy gulped, "That sounds way too ominous, so what is this? Are you doing magical research?" He leaned in and said, "No, it's something else." Yusuk leaned in close and told him, "Since I didn't even sleep until midnight because of you, I've gotta thank you for staying right here with me." After that, the main character reached out and laid both hands on the Grim Reaper's shoulders, then started a slow, soothing massage. Then Yusuk zeroed in on the point his friend seemed to answer with the most punch, and he blurted out, "Is that really the most pleasant thing?" As he said it, he couldn't help thinking the guy was weirdly built, more slender than he expected. The main character cracked jokes with him, and even offered to be his servant for the glory of evil. Then Michelle's face lit up like crazy, and she agreed to it without a second thought. Yusuk laughed and admitted he was just messing around, then slid his hands off the Reaper, while also telling his friend he'd been keeping things a little too sealed up. The Grim Reaper shrugged and admitted the truth. Everyone bolts the moment they spot him, so Yusuk shot back, "Have you ever run away yourself?" Said he'd finally get it, that he needed to be way more careful with him. The main character thanked him for the help and gushed that the breakfast was insanely tasty. Then the Reaper leaned in and asked if he was really heading back to the dungeon today. He nodded yes, and Minerva immediately said, "Let's go together." On their way, Yusuk fired off a question, "So you're hunting a witch too?" And the guy snapped back that it was nothing but a waste of time. The Reaper snapped that he had bigger things to handle and flashed one object. Then the main character blurted, "Is it magic?" His friend smirked and said the amulet could store magical power. Yusuk demanded how any of this connects to the dungeons, and the answer hit hard. At the very bottom, there's a rift spewing a massive surge of magical essence. There he works, pouring magic into the spheres like it's his lifeline. He's desperate to escape the city, but outside these walls, there's not a single rift to be found. After a while, they finally reached the dungeon restroom, and Yusuk shot him a grateful look, thanking him for seeing him off. At that exact moment, the Grim Reaper thrust a bento into his hands. Then the protagonist stared in shock, because it felt way too heavy for something that small. Minerva declared he'd dive as deep as he could, and vanish for 3 whole days, so Yusuk just told him to be safe and take care of himself. Soon, the very first customers rolled in, and he turned to Regal to ask how his leg was. Regal thanked him for the help, then swore he'd pass that gratitude right on to the Grim Reaper. Then Yusuk clocked a bruise on the guy's arm, snapped, "Where'd that come from?" And the guy shrugged, saying it was just from a fall, a little scratch, nothing to worry about. Yusuk wasn't buying it though, because he had something to say about that kind of scratch. Yusuk pulled out a Moroccan pumpkin boom. It gently stitched his wounds back up, costing 20 lira, and right inside the pastry shop you could heal too. And a few seconds later, the injury vanished completely. Regal admitted Mariah's restorative tea worked better, but he still said the pumpkin was cheap, and you could grab it and take it with you. Yusuk's whole face lit up with relief. Then the girls came barreling in, and Merle fired off a quick question. Did sweets really heal wounds? After that, she said exactly what she wanted, and Merle wished him a good morning. The girl clocked that her friend had started hurting herself lately, and right then Merle, still munching on a sweet, swiveled toward the main character, spilling what happened yesterday. Right then, other adventurers barged in and demanded they be handed 4 Moroccan pumpkins, only for it to turn out to be Garmin Propkins. Merle immediately puffed out her cheeks and the boy snapped back. What happened? She told him to hold his turn, and right then, right at midday, every single person vanished out of nowhere. That evening, the girls slid back to him again. Merle pushed for the panacea, snapping that she'd already tried it 20 times and still kept messing up. The main character grinned and said, "Yeah, this game's got its own tricks." After a while, he started craving something to eat, and then, boom, Minerva's bento popped into his mind, packed with a downright luxurious spread of dishes. At that exact moment, Merle peered inside and demanded, "Tell me this isn't really a bento sent by someone who loves me." He told him that wife's name sounds like Minerva, even though it's feminine, and the guy just said they're friends, not more. while the girl tried to argue him into backing down. Myra nodded along like she agreed for real, and Merle snapped, "You're sure you think the same?" And Myra fired back, "Yes, absolutely." With a smile, her friend said they looked like real friends, and Merle snapped back instantly, shouting that she was dead wrong. The girl told Yusuke and Minerva to stop, then Myra shot back, "Why are you so mad?" Her friend snapped back that the Reaper had feelings for the main character. Yusuke and Myra froze when she spoke, and the guy snapped back, saying she was wrong. So Myra demanded what she truly believed, and the girl hit back with the same cold truth. She was right. Merle leaned in and asked if he hadn't guessed already, and he admitted he'd had that gut feeling. Then she teased that only someone with that kind of swagger could have made such an awesome bento, and he nodded. Yeah, that thing was absolutely huge. Yusuke said it wasn't some big confession at all, warned me not to jump to conclusions, and insisted she was blowing it up over nothing. His words crushed the girl's mood, and she hustled her friend off, saying they needed to make some money. Myra waved goodbye to the main character, and he hurried back to remind them to take care of themselves again. He told himself Minerva was still a good soul, no matter what, because she kept being kind to him, and honestly, it felt like deep down he was just fighting his own hatred of girls. He figured he'd be gone for 3 days, maybe 6, so yeah, worrying now was pointless. He'd sort it all out later. 3 days passed and morning showed up again. Then boom, they ran right into the Grim Reaper, and he laughed that it was pure coincidence. Minerva leaned in and asked if he was heading for the dungeon, then offered to guide him. Yusuke figured he could handle the stairs alone, but out loud, he just nodded and agreed. Then the Reaper slammed a bento down in front of him and snapped, "It's yours." For a second, the protagonist thought his powers were back, until Merle's words hit him, and he realized he should quit guessing and ask straight up. He kept hesitating like, "Should I do it now?" Then Yusuke snapped his gaze to Minerva, waited for the reply, and finally set the sweet right on his palm. Turns out the machine's gift was pure panacea. He yanked it out in grateful delight for the bento, and yeah, it totally caught him off guard. The main character raved that the Reaper is insanely strong, but you can't ignore safety. He's going to grab another one for himself next, and if he pulls it off, he'll do it again, and then Minerva immediately agreed to take hers too. The second Michelle's hands brushed his, it hit her. This man wasn't just close, he was her other half, and the way he gave her what he craved for himself made her wonder, was this really love? She cradled the panacea like it was priceless, convinced there was only one thing left to fix, one illness that had to be cured, then swore she'd never, ever forget this moment. Right then, the girls burst into the dungeon at a run. Merle shot forward, yelling that she wanted a Moroccan pumpkin, and she immediately greeted him with a grin. Merle pointed out the pumpkin was tiny and asked if they had something bigger, and the guy smirked back that later on he'd bring her a package a whopping 10 times larger. Right then, the Grim Reaper crept in behind her and started a brutal fight, and the other customers flooded in too, while he couldn't stop thinking about how, when they told him he'd run a pastry shop, he'd wondered what all that sweetness could really bring him. He loves his job and wants it to last forever. Right then, a dialogue sparks inside the castle. The man got the rundown on the witch and the panacea, then the king demanded to know where it came from, so the guard snapped back. It was sitting in the store and the dungeon. Right here, the main character stood face to face with the capsule machine. Inside, it's packed with tiny furniture. First up, a set of chairs and sofas. This capsule costs 300 lira, and Yusuke couldn't stop himself. He called it seriously fine work. Merle said nobody does it because it's way too easy, and Myra immediately backed her up. She told them straight up it wasn't cheap, 300 lira for a single piece of furniture, and Yusuke figured everyone was a realist, so he blurted out loud what it even was, despite how good the quality looked. Right then, a voice whispered exactly what he'd been craving. Yusuke spun around, but there was nobody there. Turns out a tiny gnome was yapping at him, and they snapped up every capsule. Then one of them pressed a map into his hands, telling him the hot spring was up on the dungeon's 2nd floor. The gnome thanked him for the amazing goods, then told him to use them however he wanted, and the protagonist nearly choked with surprise. Right then, the Grim Reaper got wind of the spring, then laughed at the idea of anyone swimming there, and snapped at the girls, calling them idiots. Yusuke said the hot springs were separate. Merle insisted that even as friends it would never get that far, and Myra told them to just chill, because it was only a bath. Morning hit and everyone piled up at the dungeon entrance, Merle snapping that they needed to rush in fast, Yusuke already daydreaming about the hot springs, and Minerva being the toughest nut to crack. The Grim Reaper stood trembling in place, and Yusuke asked if he was all right. He snapped back that he'd been battling pests all night. Then the protagonist leaned in and hoped it all finally worked out for him. Yusuke swore the hot springs were monster-free, so you could finally rest. Then the Grim Reapers snapped that he still wasn't allowed to sleep. Minerva swore he'd make sure they wouldn't sink into anything shameful, and the protagonist snapped back, "That's not what I meant." Yusuke realized this wasn't just watching other people fall anymore, it was his first time, and that fear was crushing him. Myra pointed out the route to the second floor, and Merle warned that it'll be tougher there than on the first, so the main character's worry doubled instantly. Suddenly he snapped, "Do you hear that? Are monsters nearby?" And Merle froze, saying it was the first cry she'd ever heard in her life. Myra leaned in and swore the rhythm was like a flower insect's song, even though it sounded for all the world like a bird. The Grim Reaper assured everyone not to panic, right as the dove wandered straight into the dungeon, and the whole crowd was left gaping at his words. The main character spotted a bunch of pigeons, and Minerva snapped that they'd somehow gotten swallowed by a crowd. Then he grinned and said they just had to push farther, because the deeper they went, the more flower insects they'd find. These tiny squeakers start up the moment he's nearby, so if they clock it, he'll never make it to the hot springs with Yusuke. Yusuke's been trying to scorch them since yesterday, but nothing worked, until she hit on a genius idea. She just swapped out their sound, and that little plan kept her up all night. Now the question's burning, will she be okay since she wants to sleep so badly? Then, boom, a goblin pops up right in front of her. Then the Reaper swung once and severed his head clean off, and after that he mowed down the rest of the monsters, while the main character said, as Minerva finally called out that they'd arrived, Merle snapped that they'd hit a dead end, then Yusuke grinned and said the dwarf had taught him a spell. The protagonist dropped to one knee, then a blazing magic seal erupted on the ground, and moments later, the doors roared open. He jabs a finger at the door and warns the Black Road adventurer with a sharp edge that there's not a single trace of monsters. Then he points out the hot spring is right behind it, staring them in the face. The door swung open, and Merle burst out excitedly about how huge the room was. While Myra just smiled at the girls fidgeting, Minerva's curiosity sparked about what waited beyond the next door, and the guy stepped right up to it. As soon as they stepped in, a giant hot water bathtub towered ahead, steaming so hard the air turned thick and hazy around them. When she saw that, joy burst out of her like fireworks. The main character froze. No way, the source was right here. Myra grinned and said the hot water felt ridiculously warm. Yusuke told the girls to step in first and wait for him in the other room, and Merle lit up, raising her hands like we're on it, while the girl with bangs grinned and practically begged for it to happen right now. The young man stared at the man in black, and the silence in the room made his nerves creep up, while Minerva stood beside him, saying nothing for several tense seconds. After that tense silence, the guy begged him, "Don't lose your temper," and the Reaper stared back like, "What?" while the guy kept pushing him to stand tall and be a man. The Reaper took it in stride, and the guy grinned, patted him on the back, and said there was always something going down at the springs, only for the man to stumble from the smack, trying to get a word out. Yahij snapped his head around, cueing the girls that they were still waiting on them. Merle nodded and yanked off her dress right away. Myra grinned and said they were already heading over. Then the door swung shut behind them. The protagonist snapped his focus to the next door, wondering if monsters were waiting in there, only for Minerva to explain that nothing was stalking him, because the source was sealed behind a barrier. The moment it appeared, it warned that the door was opening. Yusuke's heart jolted, dread and hope crashing together as he stared forward, clueless what would hit him this time. Right in front of them sat a fridge packed with different bottles on every shelf, and the young man and the Reaper stepped right up. Then the black-robed guy blurted out what kind of box it was, and the guy just grinned and said, "It's a refrigerator. It keeps things cold." A message popped up on the system screen listing what was inside the fridge: Ramun, a drink that boosts magical blood flow, and Nikki, one with an antipyretic effect. The young man grabbed 2 bottles, grinned, and joked that it'd be awesome to stock a few more candies in the fridge too. Minerva said she wanted to try Ramun, and the boy told her, "After the bath, trust me, it'll taste way better." Then the bathroom door swung open. Merle and Myra headed back to the room, beaming and chatting as their whole bodies melted into total calm, the water feeling amazing. Steam billowed from their skin as they soaked in the hot springs. The girl, grinning like she'd found peace, had her hair pinned up, and that gleaming forehead made the young man wonder if whatever she was using actually worked wonders for her skin. Then he snapped his focus to the firearm Myra was holding, reminded her she'd bought it yesterday, and asked what she thought of it. And Myra just grinned, calm and easy, saying it felt awesome to hold. A system window popped up, and there it was, a water gun, a simple toy you fill with water to blast around, and it even gives a massage effect. The girl with bangs grinned with satisfaction, hugging the thing like she just found treasure, and said it helped her numb shoulders feel better. He flashed an awkward smile, silently wondering why her shoulders felt worn out, while his eyes lingered just below her face. yet he was still thrilled the guns were actually doing the job. The main character snatched up 2 water pistols, stared Minerva down, and said, "We've got to try these 2, especially if they've got that massage effect." The Reaper first brushed him off, lost in his own thoughts and not even looking his way, so the young man demanded what was happening. Then the masked guy finally clocked that they were talking to him, whipped his head around, and stared back with a sharp, confused look. That young man blurts it again, summoning the Reaper right into the bathroom, and the masked guy can't quite tell if the words are aimed at him, so he snaps back, "Are you talking to me?" Yahij confirms it. Minerva's whole body jolted at the boy's offer, and he spun away, leaving the young man blinking in shock and snapping, "What's wrong now?" The Reaper went visibly nervous, looked off to the side, and urged him to just go use the bathroom. Yusuke warned the girls to stay put, then offered to grab cold drinks from the fridge. Merle practically sprinted to the refrigerator, while Myra shot back a grateful "thank you" for the idea. The main character started to undress, caught Minerva staring right under his waist, froze mid-move, asked what she was looking at, and then covered himself with both hands just to be safe. Minerva started blurting out apologies, insisting this was all new to him, and the young man guessed it was just their tradition to cover up in the bathroom, so he wrapped a towel around his waist. The Reaper shrugged and told him to do whatever made him feel comfortable. He glanced just below his waist and admitted he'd learned to live with it, so Yahij snapped, "Why should you get used to this?" Without even waiting, the main character waved it off, yanked the adventurer toward the bath, and plunged his own foot into the scalding hot water, while the masked man just nodded in agreement. The young man sank into the bath with a calm grin, draped a little towel over his head, sighed that it felt amazing, and practically begged Minerva to join him ASAP. The adventurer finally blurted out, "My face is stuck too. I can't show my body yet, so can I use the lock?" The young man stared in shock, but then nodded and said, "Go on, do whatever you want." The Reaper said he'd eventually see everything, and the guy waved it off like, "Don't stress," even though he clocked how strangely unclear that sounded. Then, right behind Yusuke, a man's footsteps and a rushed apology snapped the moment into motion. Yusuke only nodded along, while Minerva, a bandage wrapped around her head, sank inch by inch into the water in total silence, staring ahead like she'd lost the thread of what she was even doing there. The young man stared straight at the spot right below the girl's shoulders, and the priestess's nerves sparked as she frantically told herself he couldn't possibly see through her blocking. From the protagonist's eyes, Minerva looked like a smeared silhouette of a man, and the young guy instantly clocked those rock-hard pectorals, exactly what you'd expect from a real, battle-scarred adventurer. The young man shot up out of the water, and the girl's eyes slid right back below his waist, because she remembered he'd wanted to try water pistols with the adventurer. Then she frowned when she looked around. The adventurer was gone, the chair was gone too, and the only thing left on her mind was Myra deciding to fire a pistol before I. Minerva smirked at the young man, asked about the chair, and promised she could help right then. She thrust her hand forward, flipped her palm open, and called forth a magical seal that shimmered with a soft, eerie glow. 2 identical chairs and 2 pistols dropped into the room against the wall, and Yahij snatched one, aimed, and blasted a stream of water pistol right into his neck, so close it landed almost between his shoulder blades. He caught the pattern, lit up with relief, and yelled to Minerva, "Now you try too." Then the adventurer spun around, stared at how he was firing mid-battle, and nodded in agreement. The girl climbed out of the water, raised a water pistol to her neck just below her shoulder blades, and the young man stood right behind her. After that gentle massage, the priestess sank back with a satisfied sigh, feeling her muscles loosen and her whole body finally unwind after a brutal long day. The young man asked what it felt like, and the girl, shaking a little, confessed with pure satisfaction that it was amazing, so he immediately nodded right along, eager and in agreement. He politely offered to shoot her in the back, and she panicked, asking why she needed that, only for the main character to snap back, "Because you can't make it there on your own." Minerva's face burned as she replayed his vague words in her head, and the embarrassment kept stacking until the thought of what came next felt unbearable. She clutched her fingers together and then snapped her elbow into the young man's side, fighting to refuse his offer. The adventurer spun away, blushing hard as she clutched her red cheeks, and insisted it was still too early for this, while the guy finally snapped out of it after the hit, blinking like, "Too early for what?" Then he offered to grab Ramune, and she nodded, agreeing without hesitation. Hot spring bath, Merle bursts into tears and asks Yasuke how to open a soft drink bottle, but he just shrugs and admits they have no clue. Then he pops it open anyway. Every young lady lit up, saying it felt sweet, gentle, and just right, like the magical power inside them suddenly flowed smoother than ever. The main character took a few bold sips, then broke into a joyful shout. Turns out it was, in the end, absolutely delicious. Yusuke lifted the bottle, stared at the drink, and suddenly the summer holidays, the fairs, and the public baths all crashed back into his mind. So he wondered why Ramune felt like it was tied to the most important memories. He leaned in close, stared at the bubbles inside that bottle, and suddenly the past hit him like a wave. Then today's memory, tied to Ramune, slid straight into his heart. Hot springs blasted steaming clouds into the air, the water softly murmured, and a bunch of folks lounged on a stone bench crafted by Minerva. The main character let out a satisfied breath. So quiet here, no monsters at all, meaning he could finally sit back and breathe. Then Merle smiled and said she was getting sleepy, and Marie immediately told her that once she rested, they'd go hunt the monsters on the second floor without any trouble. The young man and the girl with braided bangs snapped back to reality, blurted about work, and burst into tears when they stared at Marie, who just blinked at them, confused. A week later, they finally reached the hot springs entrance. Now every adventurer can drop their guard and melt into the warm water. At the hot springs, Minerva carved a hard line between the men and women with earth magic, and when two adult guys stepped up to the protagonist and asked for 2 water pistols, he happily agreed. That sweet candy craze has blown up, especially the water pistols, and the post-adventure massage hits different too. Maybe that's why veteran adventurers are suddenly in demand, because 2 adventurers just bought pistols and immediately demanded to shoot at the numb spots on their bodies. The protagonist overheard the hot spring adventurers raving about how amazing it felt, and he chose to give them space so they could soak in peace without anyone ruining the moment. He marched back to the counter with the goods and noticed the drinks had turned more lively after the source. Then demand for coffee with milk and fruit juices shot up fast. The young man also urged Mary the team maker and Senaga the blacksmith to team up, and that move helped spark the whole great success. The blacksmith gave the guy a grateful nod for the invitation, and the teapot grinned like, "You really did me a huge favor," while the young man pointed out that the ball game is a hit because every adventurer dreams of the panacea. There was even a whole line waiting just to play on the machine with the game. In that room, he blurts out the spring's name, and on Senihagi, Yunsha grins awkwardly, because now the only problem hits. People start calling the source by his name, and yeah, that's already way too much. No matter what you call it, the main character prays this place turns into a safe haven for adventurers. And then, right on cue, a bunch of armored soldiers marches up to the main door. Yahagi's face lit up in shock the second he spotted the soldiers barging inside, and then a man behind them called out, asking straight up if there was a pastry shop here. He stepped into the place draped in rich clothes and glittering jewelry, a slightly plump old man with a kind face, yet a heavy, gloomy look hung over him. Yusuke stared in shock at the short man, couldn't stop wondering who he was, and whether this guy was some kind of aristocrat. The entrance to the hot spring loomed ahead, and this young man was boxed in by soldiers in night robes, pinned against the wall with zero room to breathe. Then the same tightening net closed in again, and his nerves exploded. The girls and customers in the pastry shop went cold with nerves, as the aristocrat stepped straight in front of the soldiers and stared them down without flinching. A man stares at the kid and asks if there's a pastry shop around, and Yahagi answers with a grin, "Yeah, there is," because he was told a dungeon store doesn't need a license at all. The aristocrat went stone-cold silent for a few heartbeats, then snapped, "I'm sorry," and pushed back. This wasn't happening his way. He waved the soldiers off, shouting for them to step back so they wouldn't mess up their conversation. The moment the soldiers obediently cleared the way, the older man snapped, demanding if the rumors were true, that they were really selling a panacea right here. The young man finally exhaled in pure relief when he realized this man had only come here for one reason. Then the young man jabbed his finger at the slot machine and said, "This is exactly what you need, just a plain slot machine to bring you luck." After breaking it all down, the aristocrat grinned and wouldn't let it go. He was dying to try it, because the panacea is a prize. The guy clocked that he looked downright imperious, but whatever power he carried, there was no harm in it. The older man shoved a shiny, carved coin into his hands, worth 100,000 lyre, and asked if he could trade for it, but the main character just stared back, realizing he didn't have anything that big. The rich man fumed and barked at his armored soldiers for any spare change, and just like that they started digging through their wallets and handing over their coins. Then the aristocrat snatched them up, ready to try his luck at a game. But right when he realized this was one of those insanely popular games, he groaned, because now he had to wait for the line that piled up in front of the machine, so he stepped to the very back of the queue. That young man saw it clearly. Underneath it all, the rich aristocrat actually seemed decent, so he walked in with fresh confidence, told him he understood the rules, and then after a while playing the machine, the aristocrat finally ran out of coins. The man stared at him and admitted he was starting to doubt they'd ever pull it off, but the young man shot back with total confidence. It's absolutely possible. With bold eyes and a killer grin, the main character strode up to the slot machine, proving to everyone that winning was absolutely within reach. Tossing a coin into the machine, the young man started playing, and when it clinked into that special slot, the money poured straight into the box. He scooped the box up, waved it at the aristocrat, and basically said, "That's how you do it." The moment he saw that, the man dropped into a bow and started pleading for the panacea, but Yahagi squirmed and refused, saying if he caved, everyone else would come crawling for the prize too. The aristocrat demanded everyone introduce him as Mo Essel, the court aristocrat, then swore that medicine was exactly what His Majesty the King needed. He made sure everyone knew he was a nobleman, then grilled Leon about whether he was really going to hand the panacea to the king, and when the answer came back yes, the guy warned that if this dragged on like this, royal business would keep stalling, and that could spiral into real trouble for the whole country. Mari snapped that she was sorry, but she still had to help, and Yusuk just stared, took a deep breath, and realized there was no way out. He'd agree, hand over the panacea to the aristocrat, because this was for the king. He sighed and agreed, once only, then muttered that next time he'd have to earn it, cursing himself for never giving in like this before, and the man beamed, thanking him while insisting the king would recover thanks to this medicine. The aristocrat and his soldiers bolted out of the pastry shop, and the protagonist just stared at his hand, still clutching a 100,000 lyre coin the man had carelessly ditched there. Yahagi stared at Minerva and demanded to know if the king was cursed, and if the curse could be broken, only for her to slam the door on that idea with a brutal no, so Yahagi instantly knew this wasn't happening yet. And she kept going, saying the curse can't be lifted, the panacea can only knock it out for a short time, then everything snaps right back. The protagonist said the old man might show up again. Minerva backed him up, then told him the curse sting wouldn't last much longer. So the guy pressed her on how she knew all this, and the adventurer stammered that she just heard about it. Then he asked who told her. She snapped back, "The witch," and instantly the guy's mind started racing. Did they actually know each other? A few days later, a system window popped up with news of a brand new discovery, and it hit the young man so hard his nerves went haywire. A window popped up, spilling the box's details. Mobile Warrior Gungolf, a plastic robot figure, costs 300 lyre, snaps together with no glue, and even lets you move it with magic, which made the young man light up knowing it was popular and top-notch. Wait, don't forget the tech from other dimensions, the main character warned, and Minerva leaned in, curious if that thing was a tiny golem, only for the guy to grin and say it was a buildable model you could assemble and play with. Yusuk jumped in and explained that the Sky Soldier and the Water Machine Gun are just different model types, each with its own edge, and Minerva immediately leaned in, all hooked. The young man started snapping the model together with effortless skill, realizing he didn't need a single extra tool, and he made sure the man in black robes saw it. After snapping the final piece into place, the guy grinned and started testing the robot's mobility, clicking through every part like a kid in a candy shop, because those mechanisms were downright mind-blowing. You follow the instructions, realize you can control the robot with magic if you place it on your forehead, and with a shaky breath, you lift the figure up, a jolt hits you, then you set the robot down on a flat surface. Yahij snapped into focus and mentally demanded the Gangolf come out. At first, the robot just froze for a couple heartbeats, then its mechanical leg slid forward under his magic control like it had never hesitated. The main character couldn't believe it. When the model moved exactly as he expected, joy shot through him, and it looked like it could even talk, but he still didn't have proof yet. While his robot chugged along, slow and shaky, another kind of model blitzed past, and the protagonist couldn't believe it. The adventurer had stolen the villain's mech. When he stared at her in shock, she just shrugged and said she picked it for the weapon it carried. She went on to say that fine-tuning the magic power is what keeps everything running smooth, and the robot jerked its hands upward like it was begging for control. Then the young guy pressed his hands to his forehead and focused hard on the adjustment. With every ounce of strength, he yelled for the robot to move, and under the guy's control, it flipped with a sharp somersault, then snapped back upright on its mechanical legs like nothing ever happened, seconds later. Once everything finally fell into place, the young man couldn't stop grinning at the outcome, while Minerva, watching from the sidelines, just shook her head because Yusuk once again pulled off his incredible, "How does he do that?" kind of skill. Suddenly, without any warning, the protagonist's robot lunged, grabbed Minerva's robot, and slammed it to the ground, leaving her stunned. And the young man just smirked, saying that in the fight rules, if you knock your opponent down and count to 3, you win. Still mocking him, the boy dared the adventurer. "So, are you ready to lose?" Gangolf clutched the heavenly soldier tight, and Minerva's nerves spiked as she tried to wrap her head around how this was even happening. Myra and Merle rushed back to the place and froze when they saw what was going on, then blurted, Where did the toys go? And the main character spun around, shocked to find the girls standing there. Yahij stood there, chest out, confidently declaring, "This is professional wrestling," and he couldn't help but stare at them with a spark of surprise. Like, seriously, how could they not get it when he was saying it so proudly? After a bunch of rule-bending explanations about these fights between mechanical warriors, Merle's eyes lit up like crazy. Then she demanded the exact same model of mechanical warrior. Myra grinned, grabbed the box with the figurine, and declared she wanted this one. The guy was stunned she'd chosen it, and Myra said she liked it because it moved so fast, while Merle just stood there, awkward as ever, muttering that sports always tripped her up. With a pleased grin, Garm picked out a figurine for herself, and that's when Merle realized, way too late, that he'd just been outsmarted, because he wanted a mechanical warrior too. When the new product hit the shelves, customers snatched up the fun toy right away, while the boy in the cap sagged his head in disappointment, muttering that he wanted one too, but he had no money. That's when Yusuk stepped in and said they should set aside one figurine since he was a regular customer. After a while, every warrior toy was snatched clean off the shelves, no stock left at all, and the young man behind the counter just kept bowing and apologizing to the next customer, because somehow these toys were actually a hit. A few days later, the roar of fighting spilled out of the room, and right in the center, Minerva had forged a Mobile Warriors arena ring. Everybody crowded around, eyes locked on the tiny battlefield. The young man grinned like he'd won everything, because that new product was flying off shelves even after just 4 days. Every morning, 40 boxes sold out, and by the next sunrise, fresh ones already replaced them, so Merle just kept smiling at how effortless victory felt in the arena. With a bright grin and pure excitement, the girl begged the young man for Ramun, so he teased, "Did you win again?" And she practically burst, "Yes," like it happens every single time. She insisted this red shoulder model was all her own handiwork, and as the system window popped up, it painted the warrior in a one-of-a-kind color, pick from 12 shades, and it'll set you back 200 lira in the confectionery. After Merle grabbed her drink, she lit up and shouted that it was Ramun of Victory, taking delighted little sips, only for the guy to think the red shoulder was the model's name from the start, and the girl immediately choked and started coughing. She cleared her throat, marched right up to the blacksmith, and demanded the price of a battle axe for a warrior. He shot back, 2,500 lira. And when she heard that, her face tightened, calling it ridiculously expensive, but she still promised she'd buy it later once she finally had the money. Mobile warfare's newest craze is brutal close quarters fighting with real weapons, so a blacksmith started forging tiny blades for kicks, and they blew up in popularity. Now Sanaga grips a small sword and smiles, saying that thanks to Yahagi, they're raking in big money. If a warrior takes a hit beyond a certain threshold, their magic bond shatters. Boom, it's an instant knockout, and the winner is whoever forces the warrior to lose their magical link to the one controlling them. Another customer steps in to ask about mobile phones, and the main character says he's got a few left, until he spots the guy's kid hiding behind an adult, clearly squirming in embarrassment. The customer swore it was a killer game for sharpening magical control, and Yusuk clocked that the whole thing was building its spot as an educational toy. Meanwhile, the girl already began picking out the warrior she wanted for herself. After the last customer left and the evening finally settled in, he counted up the day's sales and felt a wave of relief, because the numbers were even better than he hoped, and for the first time, it looked like he could finally chase the cherished dream he'd been holding onto. After a while, the main character finally snagged an apartment for himself, right after he was done couching it in a rundown hotel, so bad the owner nearly cried, begging him not to go, and he even figured he'd still have to drop by every now and then. His new place came with a pretty standard layout. The door swung open and Minerva marched in, paper bag in hand, smiling like she'd come straight to cook stewed vegetables again, while the main character groaned inside, realizing she basically shows up almost every day and it's driving him up the wall. He even clocked that the kitchen somehow turned into the adventurer's base. Then the masked guy lifted a handful of utensils and went, it's a blender." The young man said in a flat-out honesty that if he ever had a girlfriend, she'd absolutely hate him, and just like that, the adventurer snapped around, leaning in hard, and demanded to know, "So do you have a girlfriend?" The masked man in the kitchen apron was visibly trembling, and the protagonist blurted, "So you're telling me it's that offensive to wonder if you've got a girlfriend?" Even though the truth was, he didn't have one yet. But if he's got a girlfriend someday, wouldn't this adventurer worry she'd get jealous when the masked guy cooks him dinner every single evening? Minerva snapped, fully backing him up, and said those people are pure evil. Then the young man pushed the point further, explaining that's why, the moment he finally lands a girlfriend, he's begging the Reaper to haul all that kitchen gear away with him. The masked man leaned in and asked if he wanted a girl, and the guy nodded, then fired back a question. If he had a girlfriend, would talking, dating, and all that really fill his life, even if he wasn't fully sure? And yeah, he's pushing to diversify the nights. Minerva's cheeks burn under her mask. She blurts out another question about them in a steady, confident voice, even though the embarrassment is screaming inside her. He asked the adventurer if he wasn't interested, and the Reaper answered straight, admitting he absolutely was. Then he added he couldn't keep dating his girlfriend with Minerva looming around all the time. The adventurer bowed and agreed with his take, then said the man only wanted to stay with his beloved forever. After that, he declared tonight would be the celebration, and the protagonist couldn't stop smiling because he was way too happy. This evening, the guy shot the masked man a thank you for the food, and the masked man smirked, asking if he really planned to drink today with that bottle gripped in his hands. Then the young man nodded and confirmed, yeah, he absolutely planned to drink a little today. Minerva started pouring alcohol over ice into a glass, and the guy swore it looked like top-shelf brandy. Then the girl just told him to drink more, and the main character grinned, asking if she was really trying to get him drunk. She flashed a grin on the spot and asked again, "So you want a girlfriend?" The young man, glass in hand, shrugged and said he had to tear himself away from drinks with his buddies to get back to his beloved. Then the adventurer asked what kind of girls he liked, but the guy either didn't get the question at all, or was already too drunk to even realize what they were talking about. Minerva asked him if he liked women with a Kirby figure, like Myra, and the kid lit up, saying yeah, she had an amazing shape, gentle, calming, just the kind of comfort he wanted. But then he confessed he was also all about the energetic type, like Merle. The masked man instantly thought about those girls, but the main character cut him off, saying Merle and Myra were way too young, and then added, "I'm already ready to sleep." They ate lunch, toasted with drinks, and chatted like it was nothing. Yet the guy stared at the empty glass in his hand and couldn't shake the feeling they were basically on a date. Minerva sat beside him and basically dared the rules of what he wanted. An older girl with a great body, the strongest adventurer, and when he was already drifting off, she asked for her face, her personality, and if she'd really be a good match. Knocked out from pure exhaustion and booze, the main character drifted off mid-conversation, and the girl beside him finally slipped out of her mask. No stress, no fear, because he wasn't going to see her true face. With a tiny smile and a shy blush crawling across her cheeks, Minerva leaned in and promised she'd be kinder from now on, and when she looked at him asleep, her eyes caught the room's light and shimmered like something beautiful. A few days later, the mobile arena is roaring back to life. Fresh fights are happening, hauling in new clients and anyone who just wants to watch the spectacle, and Myra barges up to the main character with a grin, telling him she's got an idea. She shot a hesitant idea his way. Why not organize a mobile warrior tournament for anyone who wanted in? Then watched his face twist as he realized this wild proposal had come out of nowhere. Minerva said it sounded awesome, and Merle was already on board. Then the young man weighed it all in his mind, drawn by the excitement and the promise of profit, so he decided it was absolutely worth going for. Myra jumped in and backed the girl the second she asked what the prize would be, leaving the guy stuck, because it didn't look like there were many options at all. After mulling it over, the main character boldly proposed a panacea as the tournament prize, and everyone snapped yes at once, grinning like they'd just won the jackpot. An aristocrat stormed into the place, demanding to join in too. Then the young man nodded and said anyone with a mobile warrior could take part. The rich guy grinned, claiming he'd arrived perfectly, because they suddenly needed a fresh batch of medicine. And then he promised he'd buy every warrior and asked the young man if he'd join, only for the kid to awkwardly nod along, confirming he'd absolutely participate, while silently panicking that maybe he'd gone way too far with the reward, especially since a rich man like this seemed to want to teach her. The hot springs arena is packed again. People can't get enough. Merle steps forward with total confidence, swearing she'll show that her warrior's body is the strongest. Minerva just smirks and fires back. In the mech camp, there isn't a single enemy who can withstand her. Myra cradles her mechanical warrior in her hands and swears she won't lose either one. Then the young man scans the crowd, makes sure every participant is there, and solemnly declares the Mobile Mech Tournament is underway. Everyone's been waiting for this moment, the real tournament, so their mobile warriors can finally show what they're made of. The heroes expected mostly young adventurers stepping up, but the crowd also packed in plenty of seasoned veterans. Yeah, the prize sounds like a miracle cure, but it's not exactly what the tournament fighters are craving. At least, that's what the young man felt as he kept his thoughts from drifting, even as he noticed how warriors were adored across every generation. He clocked the aristocrats' games and realized he'd desperately need a panacea to fix this, so the rich man marched up and told his soldiers to crush the tournament with everything they had, and they snapped into action, fully agreeing. As soon as all 32 fighters showed up, the arena erupted with a roaring crowd, and a young man grinned and shouted that the first round was officially underway. Then he called out the first fighter, a dome fur with a battered, broken face, and everyone gasped, because this student was supposed to be from the academy, a black third year. The protagonist clocked that the guy didn't look like a student at all, yet he still got announced. Then the young man declared the next challenger, Minerva and her brutal heavy mech, and the masked fighter hissed a warning, swearing he'd smash his opponent, all while already knowing Minerva was about to crush this round. And she snapped that he was a pathetic student, and he stammered back that he never studied at the academy. He just shoved his mech into the arena, and she shot back that he talks way too much. The protagonist bellowed that the round was starting, and the male warrior charged forward as the other guy screamed for him to finish it, way too confident, totally underestimating his opponent. Suddenly, the Minerva warrior slipped behind the man's model, dissected the stored magical power, and realized the control was shaky, leaving him in a straight-up losing position. And with a brutal roar calling him a loser, the heavy Mac crushed the man's model in a single blow, leaving him staring in shock, because he got wiped out by nothing more than one hit. The main character pumped the adventurer's fist and congratulated him on his win. Everyone nearby gasped like, already, because deep down, they'd kind of expected fireworks from that night, and Minerva just smirked to remind them this was only the first round. The wanted witch's mask covered more than her face. It locked away her feelings too, because she was grinning after beating her enemy, even while making sure her fur stayed perfectly intact. She also remembered this: if she treated him with kindness, Yusuk would fall for her, even if she looked a little odd to everyone else. And sure enough, Merle thought he'd probably be relieved he'd won after all, because that was exactly what everyone expected. She also made it crystal clear she wasn't backing down. She said the strongest spot was hers, and she'd win the tournament with one single blow. The girl proudly rolled out her custom mech, Sinaga-forged battle axe in one hand, wheels tuned for lightning-fast dodges, and extra armor bolted on the chest and head. Then Merle beamed and declared it a brand new special product, bragging that its spears were absolutely incredible. She shot Minerva a sly smile and told him to get ready for battle, and when the adventurer snapped back in anger, he realized she was chasing victory in the exact same brutal one-shot. The first stage is done, and the main character clocked it. Garm and Myra impressed the regulars, but Regal got shut out. The boy just dropped his head, crushed by the loss. Yusuk sighed that it was a shame the kid couldn't win, and he was dying to get that model. But the boy just shrugged and said it was fine, because hanging out with Max every day made him happy. Regal grinned from ear to ear, cradling the mechanical warrior in his hands, and practically announced that he couldn't wait for the next tournament, because he was coming back to claim victory for sure. The main character told him, "Don't rush, this tournament isn't finished yet," and he only nodded along until a voice shouted from behind, "Don't think you're the only one waiting for the next tournament," and the guy snapped around. It turned out to be none other than Mo Hessel. He'd already gone down in the first round, but he still threw his hat in the next tournament, ready to prove what he's got, even if there's no magic cure for the prizes. He leaned in and whispered to the main character that he'd spill this place to the aristocrats, and even the king, because it was just too fun to keep quiet, and the guy instantly felt like, maybe, this was his shot. After a quick breather, the Mechanical Warrior tournament roared back to life, and boom, Myra and Garm were knocked out, while Merle, the brand new winner, got wrecked in the semifinals. The finale is here. Two warriors sprint into the arena's mechanical ring, and Minerva's model ends it in an instant with one crushing blow, sealing the young man's victory. The protagonist cheered for the winner, and the masked man shrugged it off like it didn't matter. But inside, she was absolutely over the moon about crushing her opponent with a single devastating blow. The protagonist bragged that this Mechanical Warrior tournament win was absolutely legendary, and Minerva didn't say a word, yet deep down, she was thrilled, soaking up the praise from the young man she clearly had her eyes on. Merle sighed that it was a real shame to go down with her gear. Marie snapped back that the adventurer's magical control was just on another level, and in the end, the protagonist handed over the panacea to the winner. And then he leaned in and said it was awesome. So awesome he's already plotting another tournament soon, and he's calling on everyone who wants in on this amazing event to come back. Even the clients and the tournament losers lit up with smiles. They'd already signed up for the next MEC tournament, some just chasing a good time, and others fully fueled by one goal: winning next time. After he sent off the last client, the protagonist grinned and declared he was throwing a party tonight, because he couldn't wait to celebrate the very first tournament dedicated to Mechanical Warriors. He even offered to feed everyone in the party, and Merle and Myra lit up at once, asking where they were headed. Then the guy turned, met the adventurer's eyes, and froze when he saw the aristocrat bowing to the masked man and begging for something. The tearful rich man begs the winner for the panacea, and Minerva snaps back that it's meant to cure the disease. He agrees, says the king's already better, and then warns that everything can flip anytime, so he needs this medicine for the worst days ahead. Minerva nervously called out to the adventurer, begged him to wait, then handed the panacea to the aristocrat. He thanked him, but the masked man cut him off cold, saying he didn't need his gratitude. All four of them went off to throw a party, and the protagonist leaned in and asked if the winner had decided to sell his prize, only for him to grin and say he didn't need the money. The guy slapped his hand onto the man in black robes, shoulder and right there, declared that he'd pay for everything today, even though he'd said earlier he didn't need money. Minerva blinked in shock, because she definitely hadn't expected the young man to pull something like that. And she told herself it was all because she was kind, that she had to keep going with that same warmth, so close to the main character that, under the mask, the girl couldn't help but blush a little at the thought. The crew finally crashed into the local pub. Everyone grabbed whatever they wanted, and somehow it all landed on the main character's tab, because he'd already promised to foot the bill that night. Chugging their fresh booze in one scorching gulp, Merle and Myra immediately demanded round 2. Merle went straight for another glass of wine, while Myra ordered yet another frosty beer. The young man blinked in surprise. These girls were drinking too, and he couldn't shake the feeling they were younger than they looked, while the young waitress shot a small smile at the guests and thanked them for waiting before sliding their orders over. The waitress dropped the order right at their table, and Myra couldn't help but notice this place fried chicken so good it felt illegal. Plus the girls insisted on loading up even more beer and wine. Minerva slid up with a white sweet wine, scooted right beside him, and offered it with a smile. Then the young man snatched her glass, leaned in, and asked if he could try it, twirling the cup like he was about to crack the secret of it. The young man admitted the wine tasted insanely sweet and begged for a bottle, and Minerva opened her mouth to object, then stopped, snatched the pitcher, and started pouring the sugary stuff straight into his cup like, "Go on, drink." After they finally left the pub, the whole crew stumbled outside, and Yusuk could barely stay on his own feet as the adventurer hauled him up. Merle asked if he was all right, and Yusuk brushed it off so the girls wouldn't worry. Myra just stared, saying his look made people think something completely different. Minerva said she'd see Yahagi off and sent the girls home, and Myra shot back that he'd be safe with the adventurer. Merle didn't buy it, but she still sent them a warm good night. The masked man figured it was all going off without a hitch, until she told the young guy to stay at her place, and then realized he was falling apart, even as everything still seemed to line up perfectly. The moment Minerva brought him to her place, the main character dropped off to sleep on the spot, already thinking he'd better change into something comfy before he crashed for the night. As the girls stared at the young man, she couldn't help but think he was adorable while he slept, shirt half off as she wondered if she dared to take his hand, and if he'd stir before she kept going. Next morning, the guy jolted awake in Minerva's house, panicked about whether he'd stumbled and drunk, and froze when he realized he wasn't in his own clothes, then spotted his shirt, freshly ironed, hanging neatly on a rack. The protagonist slipped out of the room and barreled toward the bathroom, mumbling that he prayed the adventurer would forgive him for using it without telling him. All while he peeled off the shirt the masked man had dressed him in the night before. Sleepy-eyed, the main character pushed the bathroom door open and stepped in just as thick steam blasted out from the hot spring waters, turning the whole room into a foggy blur. Through a fog of steam, he spotted someone slumped in the bathroom, long hair, pale white skin, but the haze was so thick he couldn't make sense of it, only catch faint shapes. The moment the door creaked open, the girl spun around, and Yusuf locked eyes with her. The second the young man realized she was still a girl, he blurted out a frantic apology and bolted out of the bathroom. The young man shoved his back to the wall, frozen in pure shock and confusion at what he'd just seen, stammering about the discovery as he cried out for his own new confectionery creation, guided by mysterious magic. A system window popped up, and ramen with cola flavor washed over him with this sweet calm, so the main character snatched some candies and shoved them in his mouth to regain his senses and cool down. The young man instantly thought he'd just caught Minerva's girl in the bath, and his mind spiraled into panic. Would the adventurer get furious at him for it? He sat at the table, replaying the moment he'd seen her with no clothes, and stressing over how to apologize properly for ruining her privacy. Then the door swung open, and a slightly embarrassed girl slipped into the room. The moment he saw her, the young man shot up, bowed low, and blurted out an apology for the mess. Then he introduced himself and said he was Minerva's friend, and the girl called him by name. He stared at the girl and it hit him he'd seen her before. Was she some dungeon adventurer, or had he spotted her somewhere in the city? Then it finally clicked, the wanted witch Michelle. He leaned in and asked if she was Minerva's friend. The girl stood in the doorway, nerves shaking her, and the main character blurted that he had this weird feeling they already knew each other. Then seconds later the guy snapped. "So what happened?" And she swallowed hard, answering, "I'm Minerva." Tears shimmered in the girl's eyes as she stared at him, and the main character nearly froze. Could this really be what an adventurer looks like without his mask? Sure, he'd become best friends with him, and Minerva even showed up at his house like family, but he still couldn't wrap his head around the fact that the witch Michelle was standing right there. The young man blinked in shock, then it hit him. He totally should have seen it coming. The girl shrugged and said it was just a strong magical barrier, the kind that hides everything so you never notice. Minerva stared at him with tears streaming down her face and begged him to tell her he didn't hate her after the mess she caused and the lies she pulled, while Yusuk crammed handful after handful of cola-flavored sedatives just to process her confession. Then he snapped that it wasn't true, pulled her over to sit, and asked her if she wanted something to eat. The protagonist asked why she never just said she was Michelle, and she admitted she couldn't catch the right moment, though she really wanted to. Then he pressed her for the reason, like he already had a pretty good hunch. The girl blushed hard and blurted out that she loved the main character. He went still for a couple of seconds, but inside his head he was flying, because this was the first time anyone had ever confessed their love to him. He awkwardly scratched the back of his head and grinned, saying he was relieved, yet the truth still stung. She was a wanted criminal in this kingdom, and maybe in others too. Michelle lit up the moment he answered, grinning so wide it felt like sunlight, and she asked if it was really true, if he was genuinely glad to hear it. The young man confirmed it with a nod, then added that her smile was genuinely sweet. Then the girl's eyes lit up with pure determination and joy, and she blurted out, "Let us be a couple," but the main character froze and asked, "Isn't this way too soon for us?" before demanding she explain what she meant. When they asked her what went down between her and the king, right after she was labeled wanted, her smile vanished in an instant, and she wore the same shocked look you'd see the moment an entire kingdom starts hunting her. That girl tightened her brows and stared straight at the protagonist when he asked what happened between her and the king, because now she's a hunted witch, Minerva. That was Michelle. They slid into their seats at the table, and the girl shot back with calm confidence, saying it wasn't that important, then admitted it was a story she didn't want to relive. He stared at her with seriousness and told her he wanted to get to know her better, and when Michelle heard that, she looked at him with warmth and said she wanted him to know everything about her too. After catching her breath, the girl finally launched into her tale, how, when the king's marriage proposal was announced, she was teaching at the Academy of Magic. The young man stared in shock. Minerva just smiled and said she'd finished her studies at 18, then became a teacher at the Academy of Magic. Ever since she was a kid, she had been obsessed with studying and drowning in magic, so she truly believed it was her calling. Then the article she published blew up fast, and the whole world started shouting that she was a genius. Even the king took notice and leaned in. Now she can't stop thinking about it. He figured that if he won her as his wife, he'd unlock all sorts of magical perks. And yeah, he found her stunning, but her self-esteem was so crushed it wouldn't let her believe it. Right after that, he shot her a straight question. Did she love the king? And Michelle shook her, shut it down instantly. No. Ever since she was a kid, she only studied and never let anyone into her heart. No romance, no nothing. With her quiet, gloomy vibe, the boys picked on her, so she snapped back using forbidden magic, until one by one they stopped daring to mess with her. When a stranger showed up and said the king wanted to marry her, she finally understood she'd lost everything about herself, so the guy nodded and asked how she'd taken her revenge. She even hooked another boy onto the tower's spire to hang there, and when he heard that, nerves shot straight through him. She decided to ask the very same way she'd thrown that curse at the king. Then Michelle snapped back that the king was about to end their engagement and marry Taddy. The young man shot her a question, "Are you a queen?" And the girl nodded, even admitting they'd known each other for ages, but then she kept glancing off to the side like she was hiding something big. And then when she finally arrived at the royal palace, she stood right beside the king, and the king declared he was going to marry Teddy, while making it crystal clear to Michelle that he'd never been engaged to her. Teddy, like always, snapped that the girl was dressed vulgar, then burst out laughing at Michelle, staring down at her like, "I'm better than you." After that ugly incident, the main character snapped that she'd cursed the king, and Minerva confirmed it, then revealed he's been suffering for 3 straight years. For a few breathless seconds, everything goes silent, until the girl trembles and he blurts out, "Are you still hurting?" She answers without wavering, shaking off the pain, saying she doesn't care about the king anymore because she never loved him. When he saw her tears, he blurted, "Why are you crying?" He figured she must regret what happened, but her answer caught him off guard. She couldn't bring herself to curse Taddy, even though she didn't fully understand why. Michelle frowned, tears spilling down her face as she accused Titty of being lazy, then bragged she still had an amazing gift for magic, because right before she could cast the curse, Titty slipped away at the last second. After pouring out her long, gut-wrenching tale, she snapped her mood back into place with a bright smile and leaned into the main character. "So tell me, do you still love me, even after all that?" He said it caught him off guard, so why not hit the reset button and start over as friends? Michelle shot him a look, told him they already were, and the moment she met his eyes, he couldn't help thinking she was seriously adorable. She told him friendship is the warm-up act before a real relationship, because she wanted that exact thing. Then Michelle lit up with an excited grin and insisted, "Yeah, I'm the one they're hunting," but he still said he'd show up for their date anyway. That was the trouble, and it was already too late. He fumbled, scratched the back of his head, and blurted, "Nice to meet you." The girl's face lit up, but she swore she'd stay on guard so they'd never get caught, and that she'd be by his side no matter what. The boy thought being around adventurers would finally toughen him up, but Minerva pulled him aside and asked if he was sure he wouldn't stay the night with her. Then he snapped back that he was heading straight to his apartment. She had no choice but to agree, because when the main character said they'd meet later in front of the dungeon, it sounded like he wasn't buying the idea that he was into boring, gloomy girls after all. When he walked away, the girl snapped back about the purchase, said she'd taken responsibility for buying it, then shook her head, tossed it straight into the trash, and didn't think she needed it at all. The soft handcuffs sailed into the trash can, and Michelle's smile lit up, like yes, we're really dating now, so she didn't need them after all, just as she'd planned the moment he refused. The very next day, Merle stepped into the hot springs and froze, staring at what was unfolding in front of her, completely baffled and unsure what to make of it. Minerva, all smug behind her mask, hands the protagonist the bento he cooked up himself, and he grins with a tiny blush as he thanks her for all the work she did. After he says it's gotten way warmer lately, the adventurer shrugs and goes, "Yeah, summer here is brutal," and then he smiles like it's obvious and says some fruit ice wouldn't hurt a bit, while the girl watches them, completely lost. Merle shots out a suspicious, "You two are way closer now," and the protagonist just shrugs. Mary immediately points the finger at that recent dinner. The girl then whispers her theory, saying Minerva must have slipped his hand onto the drunk Yusuk. The girl with the bangs slid up to the counter, popped gum and seaweed with a gulp of vinegar, and the guy shot back, "So you're heading for the mud monster?" She nodded, and when the gas monster drops at least 10,000 lure, they throw on a curse that wipes out every sound. Myra, with a shy smile and a rosy blush, couldn't help noticing the adventurer's chest had suddenly grown bigger. "That's why I use vinegar algae to wipe away the curse of silence." She even said powdered juice works too, but you'd struggle to use it mid-fight, and Merle swore they'd rake in the money and head to Korea. Myra finally explained that the Mountain Me was really about one thing. The Fujira flowers this season are unbelievably beautiful. Then Merle leaned in and said this is popular entertainment, sure, but the country's future is hanging in the balance too, even as tourism keeps pushing forward, and she just smiled like she knew more. That girl with the bangs begged her, "Don't shout about it." And then the main character froze, staring at the future like it had betrayed him, because just the other day, Regal was nearly attacked in that dungeon, and he'd stepped in to help him. But now he couldn't shake the feeling it might all be true. But the main character shrugs. When you're just an ordinary candy seller, none of that changes a thing, and Merle admits the mountain is straight-up breathtaking. The young man mulled over this brand-new place and finally grinned, "This is wild." Then he said he'd invite Minerva over to check out the Sakura for themselves. The girl flushed a little, realizing this whole situation screamed something off, and Myra just kept right on teasing her. That evening in Yusuk's apartment, he and Michelle sat down for dinner, then he leaned in and asked if she'd been buried in her research. Michelle just smirked and said, "When I'm busy, then turned the question back on him, "So why do you need this info?" Then he admitted he needed a breather too, and urged her to take a walk with him. Maybe to see the blooming Fujira on Mount Regala, the one Myra and Merle had told him about earlier. Michelle snapped still, staring at him, mind blanking as his shocking offer hit. She couldn't even find words, trying to figure out if this was truly happening to her. When Yahagi's proposal caught her off guard, the girl's spoon clattered to the floor, and with an awkward gulp she admitted it was a date. Then she clutched her chest and he instantly went nervous. Michelle declared, "I'm going to die from happiness," and the young man laughed it off, handing her some calming candies. She popped a few into her mouth, then he asked, straight up, if she'd come with him, and she practically beamed as she agreed. The very next day, they were about to head for Mount Regala, so the protagonist, like a proper gentleman, offered his hand and helped her into the carriage. One guy looked confused like she hadn't been invited on a date, but it didn't matter, because they were dating. In the carriage, Michelle pulled out chocolate candies shaped like cigarettes, offered one to the young man, and he grabbed it right away, because the crazy part was this. Once the candy hit his tongue, he could telepathically talk to anyone within 10 meters. Minerva shot the guy a quick, guilty apology and asked if they could meet again in a different outfit. Then he waved it off and said, "It's okay," because she was wanted, and he'd keep her secret no matter what. Then he shot himself a quick plan, restaurant first, get the meal he'd already ordered just for this moment, and he told the coachman, "Take us there." The masked girl caught herself thinking about making a bento, but the young man grinned and told her, "Next time, our coachman will bring us straight to a famous restaurant." The main character grabbed the pre-made order from the restaurant, and the whole thing was sealed up tight in a really nice, surprisingly sturdy box, so cute that Michelle couldn't stop staring. She caught the idea that next time they should grab some home-cooked food, and Yusuke just shrugged, "I'll wait." The coachman then spotted his cigarette and handed over matches, like he was making sure that spark didn't die. The couple stared at each other in shock, because he genuinely thought those were real cigarettes, so the young man quickly apologized and swore they were just sweet chocolates, not real smokes. Both of them felt the coachman was cursed with bad luck, but he didn't slow down. He just kept driving the carriage onward, and the main character couldn't shake the feeling this was his first time ever leaving the city, until the carriage finally pulled out of it, and after a while, the coachman called out that they'd reach their destination soon. After they bilayed out of the carriage, Yahagi and Minerva rushed toward the mountain, only to find a crowd packed so tight that you couldn't even see a thing from where they stood. Then he realized it wasn't a mountain at all. It was a zom, and it looked tiny compared to the hype. The young man urged them to go higher, and the girl nodded right away, so the two started climbing Mount Regala, bouncing past those not too steep ledges and refusing to stop. After a long climb up to the mountain's peak, the couple finally broke through the clouds and stared down at endless pink flower fields, so far below that even the little houses looked tiny. The main character and Michelle stared into the distance, frozen in awe at how breathtaking everything looked, while the fields shimmered like glowing pink clouds, because there's just no way to put this kind of beauty into words. Michelle nodded along with the guy and spun him a legend, say a lover kisses under the frujure's blossoms, and they'll live happily ever after, right up until the next one flowers. She spun away and apologized, saying she couldn't take the mask off, and the guy scoffed, sure, he wasn't a magician, but that mysterious confectionery lets you grab any item from the store, anytime you want. A deck of cards materialized in his hands, and each one could blast mysterious smoke, perfect for vanishing from battle with a full smoke screen, so he pressed his fingertips to the cards and summoned the haze instantly. Minerva snapped back, stunned to see a mysterious smoke screen blooming around her, and she stared at the young man still rubbing his fingertips. Then the main character grinned and asked how she liked the magic he'd baked into that confectionery. Not even pausing for a reply, the main character, so sure the smoke hid them, told Michelle to take off her mask, and she hesitated as she slowly pulled it free. She yanked off her mask and blushed as she stared at him, cringing over her big lips and how much she hated her own face. Then Yusuke only smiled and told her lips were gorgeous, just like she was. She shot a nervous glance at him, then slid her hand up to his face, lifted her chin, and surrendered to his gentle kiss under the blooming Fujira flowers, without a shred of worry that the heavy smoke might be hiding watchers. Back at the pastry shop, the couple ran into Merle, who grilled them about whether they'd gone to the mountain together, until the guy just smirked and claimed they'd only managed to get one step ahead. She gave him a sarcastic nod, and the guy immediately snapped. "What, did I say something wrong?" Merle jerked a finger toward Minerva and said that ever since he came back from the mountain, he'd started acting even weirder. The adventurer giggled under his mask, just a little, yet it sent a chill through the air and freaked everyone out. Michelle leaned in and told him there was no way out anymore. Then the guy's stomach dropped, because he desperately hoped she meant monsters, not him, especially with that mask look like she was fully possessed. Merle burst out happily, told her everyone was dating, then ordered vinegar seaweed, and as they started eating, Merle hovered behind her and teased, "Go ahead, munch that seaweed, you'll never grow." Meanwhile, inside the king's castle, a nobleman leans in to watch mobile warriors battle in the arena like puppets, yanked by the king's magic control, while a court soldier stands right beside him. The king stays perched on the throne with the queen beside him, and she tells him he can't leave the castle yet. He nods like he gets it, then settles in and keeps watching the warriors clash on the battlefield. The king's tiny model snapped its sword up and slammed it into the warrior in a single strike. Boom, he crumpled onto the arena with a dull thud, going down without a fight, like the duel was over before it even began. The king grinned like he already won, and the soldier snapped into a bow. Then the queen smiled too, praising how His Majesty's skills keep leveling up day after day. The girl blurted out her improper thoughts for His Majesty to hear, with zero shame in front of everyone in the room, then flashed a sly smile, already plotting her next move. The king beamed and praised her as the perfect queen, but Essel started to blurt out that once her health got better, the government relations staff would too, only for the king to cut him off before he could finish. He told everyone that their majesty was worn out, sneering as he stared the aristocrat down, and the queen matched his contempt, eyes cold, respect nowhere to be found. Then the king and queen vanished behind their bedroom wall, shutting him out completely. So Mr. Essel swallowed his pride, begged forgiveness for what he'd said, and backed away fast. He figured once the king finally got better, he'd start planning the kingdom's future again, if only his majesty could step away from the throne, because right now, a strange shadow is creeping over the ruined castle and swallowing the whole territory. The carriage rattles past a fenced field where sheep quietly graze, and the protagonist and his adventurer lean out to stare. Minerva even asks, "Have you ever seen anything like this before?" The carriage grinds to a stop at Grantham's colossal gates, the Baron Essel's own territory. Yahagi got an invitation from the aristocrat, Mr. Essel, and right away, no hesitation, Yahagi and Minerva headed for his mansion, fully trusting there was nothing shady about him. That couple lit up chocolate cigarettes again. She joked that Grantham felt huge far off, and kind of remote, yet still oddly wealthy, and he shot back that Mr. Essel was, without a doubt, a rich man. Even the masked man pointed out that they served lamb here, and the young guy immediately lit up, saying he wanted to try it, because back in his old life he'd been absolutely obsessed with lamb kebabs. Right then, the carriage jolted to a stop, and his heart sank as he wondered, is this it? Have we finally reached the mansion? The moment they stepped out of the carriage, the couple stared up at a giant, majestic mansion ahead of them, and their mouths fell open at how breathtaking and truly grand the architecture was. Right as they stepped inside, Essel himself greeted them and demanded to know how their trip went. The couple sank onto a comfy sofa, and the protagonist hurriedly thanked the aristocrat for the carriage, because thanks to him, they'd made it back safe and sound. Their trip ate up 2 whole days aboard a horse-drawn carriage, and the boys' lower backs screamed in pain, until the adventurer's healing magic swooped in and saved the day. Then the mansion's maid slid over fresh-brewed tea with a tiny, knowing smile. The young man leaned in and asked Essel if it was fine to set up a Yahagi confectionery stall at the festival in Grantham, and the aristocrat immediately nodded, then practically begged to get a look at the mobile warriors they were selling. He even told them he'd already reserved a spot in the square and that the festival kicked off tomorrow, then begged to catch the start right now, and the other guy lit up and said, "I'm ready." Mr. Essel said that as soon as they were gone, he'd take them to the hotel they'd be staying in, and the moment Minerva heard the plan, she instantly thought, let's spend the night with Yusuf. The moment the main character and the adventurer stepped up to the hotel, it screamed wealth, towering over multiple floors and flaunting carved, grand architecture that looked even more unreal in the bright sunshine. Yahagi's eyes went wide when he blurted out that this hotel was amazing, and that if he'd had to pay from his own pocket, there was no way he could have stayed here overnight. Then the workers clocked him instantly, said they'd heard his tale, and ordered him to come with them. The hotel worker ushered the couple into a stunning, perfectly spotless suite, towering ceilings, 2 plush double beds, and windows hanging right above them like a private view from heaven. The moment he saw that, he instantly clocked how nice the room was, nothing like the Batakuro, and the worker told Yusuk and the adventurer to slow down and get some real rest. But then the guy blurted something out, and that shout snapped the worker's attention right to him. He was thrown off by the awkward mess, then quickly clarified that this was just one room, and that Minerva's personal space was right here, because he never imagined something like this could happen at all. The worker told him, "I heard you're tight with that friend, so this won't be an issue," then added that there were no extra seats for the festival. Right after that, he left and bowed for forgiveness, and the protagonist instantly realized this was definitely going to be a problem. The young man shot back that he'd hunt for some empty living room, swear this one would be hers, and grab something else for himself. Then the girl yanked off her mask with trembling hands, telling him he'd already crashed in her room countless times. So the young man reminded her, back then, he had no clue she was really a girl. Then she shot back, "What's the issue if we're going to be together again?" Michelle warned him there wasn't a single spot left tonight, because the festival tomorrow had everything booked up, and that snapped his memory back to what the worker had said earlier. In the end, the main character finally gave in, but he swore the girl he wouldn't pull anything weird. Minerva's cheeks flushed, and she nodded right away, beaming like she'd just won. Michelle's cheeks warmed as she started to tell him it was fine. Then the main character cut in, brushed it aside, and pushed for action. Leave the bags, head to the square, open the store, and get down to business. Right in the heart of the Kaplan Festival, the main square buzzes as tomorrow's event stalls are already up and running, and everyone's roaming around, doing their own thing. The young man and Michelle stepped into the square and froze, because even though the festival doesn't kick off until tomorrow, the place was packed. nothing like the empty city square they'd expected. As soon as the guy got close, it hit him instantly. This was the exact spot carved out for the Yahagi store, and he even spotted that Mr. Essel had already built an arena for mechanical warriors. With the magic of his pastry shop behind him, he hauled in a special kiosk to the prepared spot, and once it was in place, it looked absolutely perfect. It didn't take long before the first buyers zeroed in on the product, and the kids immediately started scanning the lineup like, "We've never seen anything like this before." Feeling fired up, the main characters started calling customers, urging them to check out the assortment, and swore the sweets were all the rage in the capital. The truth, hardly anyone cared, but traders kept cranking up the hype in their ads. Hessel fired off a request, and the protagonist went to Minerva, the tour's champion, begging her to give the buyers a first-class show of mechanical warriors in the arena, and she agreed. Michelle dropped the first warrior into the arena and took control. Then the local kids swarmed over, staring in shock like, "How is that doll moving by itself?" They couldn't make sense of it, but they were absolutely hooked. Yaosuk grabbed the box with the warrior, rushed it to the kids, and told them this toy is famous in the capital. People call it the Mobile Warrior, and it even moves using magic. Then he warned them that charging 30 lire is way too much for a kid. But then one grandfather strode in to buy a toy, and boom, the other kids bolted to fetch their parents to get warrior toys, while the young man swore that city champion Minerva would teach them how to play. He asked if she wanted to teach at the Magic University like she used to, and she said yes on the spot. No hesitation at all. By the end of the day, every last mechanical warrior was gone, and he knew it was Minerva's doing. Still, the memory hit him. She'd already beaten every one the kids begged for, leaving them in tears, so yeah, it was clear she didn't exactly get kids. After they wrapped up work at the festival, the couple finally crashed to rest. He even told her it was way too early for horror and pushed for heading back to the hotel, and she agreed without hesitation. Back in the hotel room, Yusuke practically collapsed onto the bed, a small smile tugging at his face as he admitted he was wiped out today, then told Michelle to let him help her take off her coat too, so she slipped off her mask and nodded. She said she wanted something comfortable, so she told the young man to close his eyes for a second, and the moment he did, he slapped his own hands over them, admitting to himself he was dying to peek at her clothes, but he forced himself not to. After a moment, the girl asked, "You ready?" And he nodded fast, but the second he opened his eyes, what he saw left him completely stunned. Michelle stood in front of him in this stunning sleeveless dress with a bold chest cutout. Then she blushed and asked if he liked it, confessing she'd wanted to wear it the second she saw it. He blushed hard, frozen by how stunning she looked in that long dress, the charming necklace catching the light and making her softly rounded features stand out even more. Then he blurted out that the dress was absolutely beautiful and fit her perfectly. Michelle's smile flickered, half flustered, half amused at his compliment, and she shot back, "Are you really being honest?" Then she teased that she could even verify it with a magic circle. He didn't flinch, just said he was telling the truth. So he figured she shouldn't waste time or clothes. He had the service brought straight to their hotel room. The next morning, the young man woke up bright as day, fresh, smiling, then pushed himself up, turned toward Minerva's bed, and asked her how she'd slept. But she clearly hadn't slept a wink. Her eyes looked heavy and gloomy, and small dark bags sat under them from a brutal, sleepless night. Michelle confessed she couldn't sleep while he snoozed like a rock, and that same room with him kept nagging at her. Yet the guy just chuckled, slipped down instantly, and bragged that falling asleep fast was literally his whole character. Minerva snapped into a frown, grabbed the dress, and declared she'd wear it again. Then the young man's eyes went wide as his mind instantly pictured the girl in that daring, deep neckline, until a few soothing candies hit, and his panic melted away, because now he was calm, he had a job, and there was no way he could keep sacrificing sleep anymore. After they wrapped up their errands, the couple headed for the square on festival day, pushed through the massive crowd, and froze, stunned by how many more people were there than the day before. He reopened his candy shop in the town square, and the second the doors swung wide, a line snapped into place, so he figured it was all those mobile warriors selling like crazy, which meant today was going to be non-stop work. Fresh off loading a brand new batch of mechanical warriors, the young man heard the townspeople cheering like they'd just won something big, spun around, and couldn't wait to find out what happened. He marched up to a townsman to get answers, asking what kind of victory this was, and the man proudly said they'd smashed the enemy army on the border. Then it hit him. The Badakuro's mistress had warned him about this war. The man went on to say General Bartos had already blown past the border and was riding back to the capital in victory, set to arrive and meet them tomorrow, leaving the young guy wondering if it was all for the festival's sake, and secretly loving it when two holidays landed on the very same day. Cigarette still burning, he grilled Michelle about who General Bartos really was. She told him he was the current king's younger brother, a a far better man, even if she couldn't stand him. He demanded why she hated him, and the masked girl snapped back that he was nothing but an indecent womanizer propped up by lieutenants. Then he realized with a jolt that the guy might be jealous of the harem, and right after that, he went back to selling mobile warriors. 2 days flew by, and now the festival's final day was here. The mobile warriors sold out again and again, and today only 3 boxes were left, barely anything. Spots of shadow clung to the last boxes, and he figured rain was coming, until he looked up and locked eyes with a tall, statuesque man staring down at him like a threat. The kid's jaw dropped at how enormous the guy was, but he swallowed his nerves and said hello anyway, voice shaking. 2 stunning girls stood beside the man. One was clearly an educated, sharp-minded, normal girl, and the other looked straight out of a fantasy world, all because of her long, elf-like ears. Yusuk instantly clocked the girl's long, pointy ears and his mind raced. So she's an elf, and do they really exist? Then the client's sharp frown hit him, and his nerves detonated even harder. Then the buyer's face snapped into a bright, friendly smile. He boomed his greeting at the young man and asked, loud as thunder, if they were selling warriors, and that single question made it crystal clear he had exactly what he wanted in mind. He picked one of the 3 boxes, grabbed a warrior for himself, and the main character nodded like, honestly, that's a pretty solid pick, even though, yeah, there wasn't really much choice left. He even offered to get the warrior a handmade miniature weapon crafted by the legendary blacksmith Sanaga, letting him pick from everything, from a solid 2-handed sword to a gorgeous, sharply curved saber with a handle carved so clearly it looked alive. After mulling it over for ages, General Bortos finally turned to his companions for advice. One girl with elven ears swore by the spearmore, while Lana insisted on the whip, just like the model box cover. After a tense stretch of testing every option, the powerhouse finally locked onto a single-bladed sword with a beautifully crafted hilt, and the moment the protagonist offered him armor and a shield, he shot it down, no help needed, because he was going to grip that sword with both hands. After they grabbed the chosen goods, the general went straight to pick them up. The elf trotted along to help, and Lana flashed a sharp look and promised she'd pay for everything. Then the main character smiled and thanked them politely for the purchase. He practiced twirling the sword until it felt effortless, and right after that, the mechanical model snapped into a triumphant pose, blade held straight out in front. Bortos watched wide-eyed as his mechanical warrior whirled in the arena, sword slicing through the air, and Yusuk immediately thought, wait, was this really his first time driving this model? He couldn't ignore it either. The warrior looked exactly like Michelle S. The man grilled the young guy, asking if the mechanical tournament champ really could teach him to fight, and the young guy shot back with a question. Would Minerva be willing to show him a masterclass? Minerva answered calmly and agreed. The adventurer and General Bortos rolled their mechanical warriors into a special arena, already running the training like a duel. Because this wasn't about learning, it was about watching each other's fighting techniques up close. The confident man grinned and asked the masked man if they could host an official tournament, and Minerva just smiled back, saying they could do it anytime. Crowds packed into the arena, hungry for the show, while the protagonists clocked it. This adventurer was way more tense than ever. Then the mechanical warriors snapped into battle stances and surged forward. Minerva's sword crashed into her warrior with a thunderous strike, but she didn't even flinch. She blocked it hard and struck back. For a moment, the warriors locked in with weapons crossed. Then, out of nowhere, the man's mechanical model shoved the adventurer's blade with brute force, blasting him backward and making him stumble. The warrior kept his sword, pressing down harder and harder on the adventurer's model. Then the adventurer stumbled back and sprang away with a sudden jump. With more confidence in every move, Minerva's warrior swung his knightly weapon from range and landed a heavier hit, so close that the other warrior nearly got the parry off. But out of nowhere, the general's warrior, who just pulled off the last attack, suddenly crumpled like the magical control holding him snapped off. In the arena, one warrior stayed standing over the fallen model of the defeated one, while kids and adults erupted in cheers over the adventurer's win. Bortos beamed and talked about his defeat, and Minerva just said nothing. Even after the loss, the unbeatable man grinned like it didn't hurt and said, "That was a great experience. Someday I'm coming back for the tournament." He spun around, waved hard, and shouted goodbye, thanking everyone for the ride, while the elf only glanced back with a small smile, then walked beside him as Lana bowed in solemn gratitude, sealing the farewell. After the general was gone, the main character thanked Minerva for all her hard work, and even called out how rare a client like this was today, only for Minerva to go quiet, pull out her chocolate cigarettes, and say, "I need to tell you something." The masked man slipped a chocolate cigarette under his mask and shot Yusuk a message in his mind. This was General Bardos, the current king's younger brother, turning the kid's world upside down, because Yusuk had been hoping to come back and now he could only pray Michelle could handle it. A little later, Mr. Essel grins and thanks General Bardos for his brutal work. The menacing guy sinks onto the couch with Lana and the elf-eared girl, bragging about how he scoped out that pastry shop. Then Essel leans in and asks, "So, how are you doing?" The heroes closed in on a building stamped with a sign at the door, Hot Springs, and it turned out this was the kind of place everyone flocked to for a relaxing vacation. Just a short distance from the springs, they slammed the brakes in front of a signboard that said Yahagi's sweet shop was temporarily closed, and that hit them harder than they expected, leaving a sting of disappointment. A local told them the shop owner had run off to visit a rich guy and wouldn't be back for days, so the girls were crushed because they'd come hoping to grab sweets. As they trudged onward, it all clicked. One of them suddenly blurted out the name of where he went, Grantham, and the second they said it, that name rang a bell. The girls buzzed about the local food, reminiscing that this city serves lamb that pairs perfectly with both beer and wine, and that combo had them hungry, smiling, and all kinds of happy. They suddenly felt a sting of sadness, thinking about Yahagi's favorite sweets they'd missed, though somehow, during their vacation, they'd grown used to the idea they had them. Suddenly, one of them beamed and waved her over with pure joy, pointing out something so intriguing that it instantly grabbed her attention and sent her into delighted laughter. They stared at a whole lineup of swimsuits, and that totally unexpected mix made them instantly wonder, did summer sneak in early? 1 second and a blazing summer vacation picture slammed straight into her head. She pictured herself rocking a barely there swimsuit in some gorgeous new world, soaking up all that warmth, while the truth back here was painfully clear. She looked way less confident. She clutched the swimsuit in her hands, stunned that her friend suddenly snapped, because to her, that choice was perfect and way more convenient. Your friend panicked, saying that outfit would drag in way too much attention and spell disaster, because the swimsuit was way too revealing. When her friend started teasing about exactly who she wanted to impress with that look, the girl froze in embarrassment and hurried to shut down every guess. Even with her worries still hovering, she brightened a lot while checking out another swimsuit, more restrained than usual, and exactly the style she liked. But the second they saw the price tag, their faces told the whole story. Turns out that swimsuit cost way more than they expected, and suddenly they started second-guessing every dime they were about to spend. One of them snapped that even with the candy store finally opened, they'd have to go right back to work, because the cash they'd saved was basically wiped out, and they couldn't stall any longer. The heroines had to tighten their budget fast, because they suddenly realized they couldn't buy everything, especially if they planned to keep a nice hotel and make their wishes come true. They got insanely lucky. An old acquaintance of theirs came back with a heavy sack packed with shiny coins he'd earned at a massive, loud festival, and everyone was stunned in the best way. He grinned as he shared the win, saying the festival sales pulled in a solid chunk of money, and that boost lit a fire in everyone. The girl beside him beamed with honest joy, cheering him on, especially once she heard that not only the main product was flying off the shelves, but the other fan-favorite items were selling like crazy too. The hero spotted those old, beat-up sneakers he'd saved from his past life, and right then he decided, no more looking back, he was going to find himself a brand new pair of shoes. Out of nowhere, his companion offered to buy him something, and he froze in surprise, because he never expected anyone to pay him that much attention. She pointed out that nearly 30 days had already gone by since they started dating, and the guy blurted out, awkward as hell, that he's terrible at remembering dates, which still stung her a bit. Next morning, the heroes hauled themselves to the Baron's estate building, because they'd come there for business, and nothing was going to slow them down. He thanked them for the setup, saying that with their help, they managed to knock out great work these last 3 days. Baron smiled and admitted he was just thrilled to watch the idea of mobile warriors spread step by step, pulling in bigger and bigger crowds of interest. The guys told everyone he had a subject to tackle, and then he leaned in on the Baron, lowering his voice as he started spilling his secret plans. The Baron lit up and pitched a plan to open a shop in the capital's most irresistible spot, and the shock on the other person's face was immediate. He pictured his humble old stall standing beside the brand new Capitol buildings, and for a split second, confusion hit him like a wave. He told me his shop was just a cozy little candy spot for friends and locals, and that building some huge establishment felt way too brutal to take on. The Baron pointed out that those goods were worth way more than their current price, and he promised that even after the hike, people would still snap them up. The young man shot back, refusing to buy into the profit argument, saying the real point was totally different. He could keep the store running only because people out there truly needed it. When the Baron heard that answer, a small smile tugged at his lips. he admitted the mistake in his own hurry and told him to drop that failed proposal for good. Right now, another hero suddenly throws out a request, and it instantly hooks the young man's attention. He straightens up a bit and politely asks what the talk is really about. The Baron demanded that he start selling mobile warrior toys across his domain because he wanted to turn the locals into instant fans. He admitted the idea is downright tempting, but he can't just ditch the hot springs and his loyal regulars who have supported him for years. The Baron snapped into action and promised to handle every delivery and post-sale problem himself, no matter what, swearing he wouldn't take a single payment or reward for it. He lit up with gratitude for the support, swore he'd deliver 30 boxes a day, and that promise left both sides fully satisfied. The Baron said, "At this pace, we can put together a full tournament," and the young man immediately asked if it was meant just for the mobile warriors. When the talk shifted to staging a massive competition in the capital, everyone there lit up, loved the idea, and immediately agreed. The heroes wrapped up the chat with bright-eyed certainty that the whole point was to bring joy to people. Then they waved each other off, swearing they'd meet again in the capital to put their shared plans into motion. A week later, a massive truckload of those mobile warriors finally rolled into the capital, sparking the big push for expanding sales and gearing up for the competition still on the horizon. He rolled up with a fresh batch of goods, handed over the sales money, and told him to pass along his respects to the Baron, tired as he looked. He couldn't hide how proud he was of the job. He stormed back to the capital from Grantham, and once the heat hit, he couldn't believe it. Summer was here already, blazing hard and totally different from where he'd been before. He marched to the dungeon entrance he knew like the back of his hand, because he'd been there countless times before. Handling springs and trade like it was just another job. With the map in hand, he marched ahead with zero doubts, because he knew every turn by heart and could reach the right spot without anyone's help. He didn't give a damn what the weather outside was doing, because the dungeon kept the temperature steady, turning every job into something way more comfortable. When he finally got there, he sprinted straight to the springs, ready to keep working and refill the shop's shelves with fresh goods. Because the sweet shop crushed it at the festival, they rolled out a brand new treat, sorbet, that cools you down fast in the scorching heat and hits you with extra perks too. The boy stared at the refrigerator, baffled that ice sat at the bottom like it belonged there, like some kind of real magic that made storing and producing food ridiculously easy. He stared at the new sign's symbol, hooked by how weirdly charming its design looked, like it was built to pull every buyer's eyes in. The girls sprinted to the candy shop, spotting fresh treats already lined up, and watched the seller smile back like he'd been waiting for them. He blared the news that sorbet was officially on sale, and when he realized they were regulars, he swore he'd spoil them with that icy cold treat. Ice started to pour from the machine and drift into the container below, snapping into tiny crystals, just waiting to be turned into a mouth-watering dessert. One girl leaned in and asked if the sorbet was ready yet, but the guy shook his head and said they still needed one more ingredient before they could serve it. He offered a syrup pick with a polite grin, rattling off the flavors on the list: melon, strawberry, and lemon. Then the girls eagerly picked their own choices, savoring every option like it already tasted amazing. Those finished desserts looked so fresh and mouth-watering that the girls practically swooned over the sorbet, already buzzing with excitement to take the first bite. One of them eagerly sipped the dessert through a straw, eyes lighting up at the flavor and texture, ready to cool down in the scorching heat. After that first refreshing sip, both girls blurted out their praise at almost the exact same moment. This sorbet was shockingly delicious, perfectly crispy, and absolutely made for scorching summer heat. The guy insisted that this delicacy doesn't just taste amazing, it also helps you battle the heat, packing serious heat resistance power. The girls cheered because they finally got to march into the lava zone on the third floor, hunting fire mist, flame-covered monsters, and raking in serious money. He whipped out a brand new ingredient, condensed milk, and said it's just milk boiled down with sugar, giving the sorbet that deep, rich flavor. The girl took a bite of the dessert with the additive and lit up. She swore this flavor turned it into her new favorite, because it didn't just improve the taste, it made it richer and even more delicious. Grinning at the treat, they practically sprinted off to battle the fire mist. Also, they could rake in cash for brand new swimsuits to kick off the season. All alone, he stared at his share of sorbet and couldn't stop thinking about the swimming pools in the capital, trying to figure out where he could finally cool off when summer hit. The girls swore that up in the north of the city, there's a river that channels water into town every summer, flooding in just long enough to form a temporary pool for anyone who wants to jump in. Soon, they broke into smiles and practically beckoned Yusuk to join them in the pool, thanking him for his help and making sure they all had a blast together. The girl teased him with a grin, then flashed in a swimsuit and struck a bold pose, daring him to be blown away. Right then, a mysterious voice yanked my attention and told me to quit fixating on the small stuff and look at what really mattered. Minerva came back, shut down the serious talk for daylight hours, and still made sure to thank everyone for the warm welcome. The girls cringed when Yusuk told Minerva they were headed for the fire mist instead of the pool they'd already planned, and the moment the words landed, total confusion exploded from a nasty misunderstanding. Minerva suddenly backed out, saying she probably couldn't make it with the others, leaving the girls stunned because they never saw that coming. While everyone was busy gabbing about the new sweets, Yusuk snapped that his shop was always packed, and after everything, he couldn't just waltz off to the pool with the other girls anymore. That sorbet was on sale, and even though she was dying of embarrassment, she still blurted that she'd eat it, freaking out over the idea that it might turn into an indirect kiss. On the very first attempt, Minerva snapped with a sudden headache, and before anything got worse, someone shot in with warm water to calm her down and dodge the fallout. On the third floor in the lava zone, Fire Mist attacked, and they fought back hard enough to win, only to watch the prize drain away as coins were taken. After getting 1,000 lyre, one of the girls lit up and announced that the strawberry sorbet was insanely tasty, then raved that her earnings only made the whole experience feel even better. Even with the heat crushing and the air feeling thick, the sorbet worked its magic, cooling their throats, quenching thirst, and keeping their energy locked in for the hike. After the brief pause, one of the girls pumped Myra up, yelling for her to push forward and head straight into the dungeon's next stage. Myra's chest tightened with sadness, as she guessed Yusuk's bad mood had to do with her invite to hit the pool together, but he came back with a comforting answer that soothed her. Myra let out a small gasp when she realized someone else had been invited on the hike, and she admitted she'd secretly been hoping to spend the day alone in a calmer, more relaxed vibe. Myra tried to flaunt her charm, but deep down, her thoughts told a cruel truth. None of it landed, and unrequited feelings crashed in like a wave. One of the girls blurted out this sudden, jaw-dropping realization. Maybe Yusuk didn't care about dating girls at all, and it hit her like a truck, leaving her totally stunned and lost. Looking back on what they'd just done, she realized Yusuk and Minerva were unbelievably in sync, like they'd forged a bond that didn't even need words. So she decided right then that outside info didn't steer her, and with a sweet, stubborn calm, she accepted it, quieting her nerves her way. Then a fresh threat exploded into the dungeon, one creature blazing with heat, and the whole team tightened up, ready to slam into the next fight with dead serious focus. The heroine was convinced that the new treat had juiced them up with strength and swagger, and the moment she got to buy something new, she grinned and charged ahead. She wasn't backing down, while her friend nodded and backed her up, vowing to keep going with her. With a blazing grin and pure power in her chest, the heroine stepped into a fresh trial. Then before her surfaced those terrifying creatures from before, only now they didn't feel scary at all. She felt light, even thrilled, and ready to face the whole thing head-on. Then, out of nowhere, an unexpected twist hit fast. One of the creatures they ran into shocked the heroine, and she instantly snapped into guard, realizing the whole situation could flip at any second. The instant a brand new guy burst in and cut across everything, the heroine froze in shock, because he stepped in like he owned the moment, and his presence completely shifted the outcome. Now she knew it wasn't the same fight anymore, so she had to move fast and adapt to whatever he'd just changed. One guy in the group gave a quick nod and a sneaky grin, agreeing with the remark, and the look on his face totally threw everyone else into confusion. He flashed a big thumbs up and practically bragged that his favorite dessert was the one loaded with sweet condensed milk. At the very edge of the cliff, the girl lunged for her prey, snapping in frustration that others were trying to claim the same targets. Sunlight blazed across the land, and the story kicked off summer in full swing with that unmistakable, sun-soaked vibe. The two girls, rocking light summer outfits, grinned when they finally found perfect gear for blistering heat, especially by the water where it felt cool. One of them, blushing at all the men staring, recalled how her friend pulls eyes like a magnet, even when she's dressed in modest clothes. Knowing it all was happening because of Yusuk's hard work, the girl finally felt calm satisfaction, and confidence settled deep in her chest. One of the friends said she wanted to go for a quick swim, but the moment the situation hit, her heart sank, so she changed her mind, and everyone else instantly caught the shift in her mood. Spotting something strange and fascinating far off, her friend snapped to attention, yelled Myra, and waved her hand hard, pointing straight at what she needed to see. She practically begged to go right now, clocking a water slide off to the side, and Myra snapped, "Wait just a little." With a tense face, the girl admitted her gut was screaming that something nasty was about to happen the moment she pushed herself to act. Her friend ignored her doubts, shoved her forward hard and fast, kept pressuring her to stop freezing, and forced her to finally take the step. While the sun blazed over Michelle's house, the rays punched through the clouds and wrapped everything in that sharp summer heat, an eerie, quiet calm. On a table inside that cozy house sat cool, refreshing food, cold pasta and veggie rolls, perfect for the sweltering, sticky summer heat. At the table, Yusuke and the girl dug into the mouthwatering food, totally unbothered, and couldn't help but grin at how insanely good the cold dishes taste when summer heat is crushing everything. He instantly clocked that she was deep in thought, then leaned in and asked what was really weighing on her, catching the turmoil she tried to hide in her eyes. She struggled to find the courage to speak, hesitated, and finally admitted she wasn't ready to make a final, confident choice yet. Yusuke carefully steadied her, and with a gentle, kind voice, told her straight up that if she really wanted to show what she had, she shouldn't hold back or feel shy. He started to suspect her vibrations weren't random at all. They had to be tied to something strange, maybe an item from the dungeon, because this world is crawling with terrifying things. Then he whipped around, his jaw dropping in shock when the girl finally showed up in front of him, dressed nothing like D ever seen before. The girl stepped into Yusuke's view in an outfit she'd stitched together herself, holding back a small smile and acting like she was totally calm. Yet Yusuke was clearly thrown by how unexpectedly prepared she was. She carefully said he'd turned down the pool because of her, then thanked him while trying to justify why she'd made that choice. Yusuke didn't dig into what she meant. Her logic left him totally lost, but he still couldn't help praising how she looked, because that look fit her perfectly. He leaned in and asked her when she'd gotten that outfit, and his jaw dropped when she said she'd sewn it herself just a week ago. The girl admitted she couldn't drag them to the pool together, so she made a brand new set, crafted specifically for Yusuke. At first, he had zero clue what she meant, but her killer confidence made him question whether she was talking about bathing shorts. Her confirmation came in one bold move. She proudly held up Yusuke's dark swimming trunks, each stitch neat and clean, as if daring him to doubt her. He let out a small breath of relief when he realized the bathing shorts matched her outfit's exact color. She confessed that being alone like that felt painfully awkward, so she pushed Yusuke to change his clothes too, because if he did, she could finally feel comfortable. He agreed without a fight, and before long she sweetly offered to run the bath instead of the pool, something that caught Yusuke off guard, but he didn't argue. The shop stocked water balloons, stuff adventurers never asked for, so they sat on the shelves, untouched for ages. Yusuke and Michelle filled balloons with water and launched them into a bath time game, choosing to cut loose with zero embarrassment and pure, bubbling enthusiasm. Meanwhile, the other girls dashed to the water slide, one shot down yelling with pure joy, while the other slid in a calmer way, still locked in and intrigued. The girl stood before the stalls, gushing about how Yusuke's backpack vanished, while one of the vendors leaned in like, seriously, that mechanism is downright mind-blowing. She kept staring in awe, amazed at the magic Yusuke had, how he could open and close things with zero effort, and even make daily life feel way easier. Yusuke watched their reactions with a sly grin, clearly pleased that he'd proven his store's value without breaking a sweat. Then he spotted a fresh message in his menu, and it hit him hard. New features were live, including the power to sell items to other people. He stared at the interface like it was a puzzle, determined to crack how to turn on the new feature and make it work in the real world. A confirmation window popped up on the screen, showing exactly what was about to be sold, and Yusuke double-checked every detail like he couldn't afford even one mistake. After finishing every last prep, he slammed the transaction into place, praying a buyer would pop up fast and that the system would do exactly what the instructions promised. Then it hit him, time seemed to crawl, and in that instant he swore he'd unlocked a special sight, sharpening his focus so he could see everything around him crystal clear. The uniformed girl beamed at Yahagi with a bright, respectful hello, and he shot back a quick greeting, matching her friendly good mood. She caught that her conversation partner was brimming with energy, and he made it clear he'd noticed her good mood, and hoped everyone around her felt it too. The girl lit up the room as she showed off her brand new fire magic control, and everyone watching couldn't believe what they were seeing. She told me it all happened because she'd trained with a mobile warrior, sharpening her focus and tightening her control over the magic currents. People around her said her skills had exploded upward, and Michelle's training was the spark behind it all, pushing their store's level forward faster than ever. A few days later, the hero and his companion slipped right back to that familiar door, gripped it hard, and tried to open it, ready to jump into whatever came next. Right in front of them, a building snapped into view. Its sign shouted that inside was a store made under the main character's name. They both froze, stunned by how massive and striking the store looked. None of them expected their hard work and strength to pay off this big. The hero said this wild shift might have come from leveling up, and his companion stared in shock, because even with her high hopes, this leap was way too extreme. The girl blinked in shock when the store building looked like it sprouted straight from the dungeon wall, and she couldn't wrap her head around how that was even possible, because even the most experienced people said it just couldn't be explained. When the call to hurry hit her ears, she didn't stall. She snapped into action and agreed at once, ready to rush inside and follow her companion without a shred of hesitation. They glanced around and realized the shop looked tiny from the street, but once they stepped inside, it was roomy, packed with shelf after shelf. The girl stared around, swearing the place screamed the past, and the boy nodded like the air itself yanked him straight back to his childhood. As soon as she stepped into the residential part of the store, he demanded she take off her shoes, explaining it was the rule in his house, and she quietly went along. When he inspected the place, he couldn't believe it. There was a real kitchen, a bathroom, and even a toilet. And yeah, the space was tight, but it was still absolutely livable. After eyeing the stairs, he leaned in and whispered about the second floor, totally hooked on what might be waiting up there in that strange, off-limits place. With the girl at his side, he guessed the second floor might be wedged somewhere up in the dungeon's ceiling, and the two of them, buzzing with nerves, decided to go check it out for real. He leaned around the corner, eyes narrowed, unsure what was waiting up there for them in the not-so-distant future. Inside, they stumbled into old-school rooms, one packed with 8 tatami mats, the other with 6, and the guy urged them to check the window, instantly hooking their curiosity. Yusuke peered out the window and felt his brain snap. Everything outside broke the rules of physics, and he instantly realized this store didn't play by nature's laws. When he scanned the room, he spotted neatly folded blankets and pillows tucked in the closet, so it hit him. He could actually unpack, settle in, and live there. Then his eyes snagged on one lone futon with 2 pillows, and confusion hit him hard, especially when the girl just sat there, smiling sweet and calm. Suddenly, Yusuke heard the shuffle at the door. Then her other acquaintances peeked in, and she rushed to apologize for the whole mess, leaving the guests mildly stunned. When the guests stepped in, he greeted them warmly, then pointed out that this place had finally turned into a real store, and that their visit couldn't have come at a better time. Then he made it official. This new spot was called Yahagi Sweet Shop ***, and he waved everyone in like, come on, get comfortable, and enjoy the sweet ride. One of the guests realized that not only did the store look different, but fresh products had suddenly started lining the shelves too, thanks to the latest update. The protagonist stared at the game's special cards, magic artifacts that once played, detonated into a massive explosive wave, and then vanished for good. That move was called *explosive Peko**, and it was sold at one fixed price. One of the girls was fuming because she'd set her heart on getting a specific character, but the card she pulled was totally different. She'd been banking on a handsome adventurer, not some stranger, and the confusion spread all around her. Out of all the fresh goodies, the chocolate stick shot to the top fast, handed to visitors everywhere with one promise. Use it and your magic power spikes, but don't get attached because it's gone after a single bite. Yusuke said a 30% gap wasn't anything huge, and the girl shot back that it wasn't a difference at all. In the next heartbeat, he launched a blazing fireball spell. The young man stared in disbelief, and the girl told him, straight up, that magic's got huge raw potential, so even 30% can still change everything. The girl leaned in and asked if he wanted to join their group, saying they needed someone with offensive magic, then admitted she wasn't all that great at it. Regal shot an apology your way and admitted that Garm had called him just recently. Then he snapped, that's not enough, and Garms barked back that he better pull off at least 3 fireballs. The girl asked Yusuke if he wanted revenge, and he snapped back that today was packed with visitors. Yusuke carefully taped up a sign that the shop was closed for today, then stayed home to grind through his thoughts and map out his next big move. Right then, something exploded inside his room. He froze in shock, drowning in confusion as a blinding flash lit everything up. When she came up to him, worried about how he looked, he only managed to say that something weird had happened to him, yet he still couldn't figure out what it even was. Yusuke said with total confidence that he'd finally unlocked brand new magic, and that victory hit hard, proving just how far his skills and control over his powers had come. She swallowed his words with calm restraint, no shock, no spark of excitement, like he'd said it 100 times before and it never really hit her like something new. She just calmly said, I've had too many shocks from Yusuke at this point, so she cut the emotion off before his next discovery could overwhelm her. Yusuke straight up admitted he'd mastered a power he calls clairvoyance, then shrugged like, yeah, it's just my name for it, and even he sounded a little unsure. Then her face snapped into shock, and she blurted out loudly, stunned they'd dare bring up a magical power that rare and that powerful. When she realized it was true clairvoyance, she blurted out that this was legendary magic, then gasped in awe. Tell me, can this really be real? After a tense pause, she admitted Yusuk really was terrifying with those rare magic types, and then she raised the stakes, saying it was time to try a brand new ability. She promised she'd keep watch over his condition, told him to stop freaking out because his body would adapt to the changes, and then slid him a magic potion to help him through it. Yusuk locked onto her warning and started checking his energy meter, because every ounce draining away could spell his death, and with a grim stare, he began to activate. After the spell hit, his spirit ripped free from his body. Then he stared at himself from outside, shocked as he felt the new magic take hold. In his astral form, the protagonist hovered in uncertainty, asking himself where to go next, totally blind to the fresh chaos about to crash into this place of wild contrasts and jaw-dropping surprises. He spotted two girls marching straight toward the bathhouse entrance, and instantly froze, because the sign clearly pointed to the men's section, and the shock hit him like a punch. Once he clocked what was happening, his mind started racing through every possible angle of his brand new magic, thinking it could twist the whole situation on its head and let him pull off something totally wild. His racing thoughts lit up one wild plan: use magic to chase the dream he swore a million men shared, and that spark turned into a dangerous mix of pressure and temptation he couldn't ignore. After a brief pause, he finally admitted the truth. Staying invisible wouldn't make it right, and that unsettled him, filling his gut with doubts about whether his plan was really the right one. A sudden drop in power hit him like a punch. His strength was draining fast, and he knew he had to finish the spell right then, before it turned on him. Panicking at the ticking clock, he hit the magic completion function and made it crystal clear. He'd return, even after only a brief moment in astral form. Yusuk looked around and realized nobody was even glancing his way, so it hit him. This weird state had turned him into something they couldn't see or notice at all. Then he tried to reach out and brush one of the girls nearby, only for his palm to slide right through her like she wasn't even there, and panic hit when he realized he couldn't physically touch anyone. Even so, he stayed bright-eyed and healthy, laughing through the day, until a faint post-run fatigue nipped at him, and he knew it was time to push onward and keep exploring. Yusuk, locked in his astral form, hovered above the street like he owned the night, eyes scanning for the next move, ready to squeeze every drop of power from this brand new magic. Then boom, two girls slipped in behind the curtain, covered in hieroglyphs, and it hit him like a truck, because he never saw this coming and had zero idea how to respond. He wondered whether clairvoyance could pull off something shocking, pushing magic to its breaking point, and he couldn't help thinking of using it for a wild, off-the-wall experiment. A wild thought hit him. Magic could help him chase the dream every man wants, and for one tense moment, he stared hard at what would come after if he actually did it. Even so, he snapped to the truth in a heartbeat. Sneaking around unseen wouldn't make it right, and that sharp gut warning wouldn't let him go any further. Yusuk felt his power slipping away, so he snapped back to action. Staying like that too long wasn't just exhausting, it was downright dangerous. He spotted a glowing interface floating in front of him asking if he wanted to return, and before he could even doubt himself, he hit yes, because he knew he couldn't stay outside his body for long. The next morning at Yahaga's shop, Regal fidgeted like crazy and demanded Yusuk confirm if he'd seen the decree she was clutching, because it held something that could shake the whole city. Yusuk glanced at the message and calmly told him, "Yeah, I already saw that announcement in the city square, because the Mobile Warrior tournament felt like the perfect chance to finally prove what he's got." Regal slammed the fact down that the king himself had signed the document, turning the whole event into something huge and unforgettable, proof of just how massive it was going to be. The girl beamed and told everyone she'd heard Essel wanted to set up a tiny tournament. Then, boom, it exploded into something huge, all the more insane when you realized the main prize was a full million. Liar. She blurted, all fired up, that her red shoulder would crush it this time. Then her friend shot back, smiling, that her house definitely wouldn't fall either, because Mobile Warriors had surged in popularity like crazy. At last, the day everyone had been waiting for was here. Boom, the tournament ignited in a grand arena packed with towering stands and roaring spectators, and the main competition kicked off so hard the whole crowd locked in instantly. Yusuk stared in awe at the huge arena, marveling that the reception looked straight out of royalty, especially since from 1,000 applications, they only let in 100 fighters. He couldn't forget that even his hot spring buddies jumped in too. Suddenly, the whole event felt way more exciting and way more personal to him. Yusuk was meant to spend his day anywhere but the arena. ESL had a special spot lined up for him, a trading point right by the entrance. He glanced around and there it was, right in front of Senaga's weapons store, and to his shock, Mary was standing right there too. Later, he caught the opening ceremony kicking off with the king's welcoming speech. Then Michelle cut it off cold, swearing she had zero plans to listen to or even look at the king or queen. Yusuk chewed on a chocolate cigarette and asked, with a flicker of interest, if he could use clairvoyant magic to peek in on the ceremony. Michelle snapped at him that he couldn't lean on clairvoyance while his body wasn't ready for that kind of strain, and right then, her voice came out dead serious. As the ceremony kicked off, everyone snapped their eyes to the arena, and the crowd erupted in a buzzing murmur, because the king himself had just stepped onto the honor platform, totally unexpected, and the tournament suddenly felt 10 times more important. The king grinned as he solemnly declared the competition open, and right beside him Queen Titty caught everyone's eye, because her magical senses could detect even the rarest, faintest magic, even clairvoyance. As the morning fights wrapped, roaring signal flares exploded over the arena, blasting the end of the round and calling for a short breather before the next huge stages of the multi-part competition. At this moment, Yusuk finally slowed down, dug into a prepared sandwich with both hands, and used this quick break to snack, soak in the noisy energy, and feel the tension hanging in the air. He yanked out a mouth-watering teriyaki sandwich, freshly made and perfectly finished with that signature sauce everyone raves about. The second he tasted that sandwich, it hit him, Michelle's culinary genius, so he couldn't help but marvel again at how perfectly she pulled it off. The girl swallowed her regret and admitted she got beaten by 2 opponents at once, then realized, shocking and undeniable, that their skills had leveled up since the last competitions. One of the participants suddenly blew up in popularity. Then a random passerby walked up and demanded an autograph, and the poor guy froze in total shock and confusion. During the break, the guy offered the girl a chicken sandwich, but the merchant's creepy look sent her running. She refused it on the spot. With pure focus and stubborn will, the girl pushed Yusuk to hand over something special, something she swore mattered more than anything else in that moment. He proudly held up a box of a rare collector's model and hyped it as a brutally powerful warrior, one that takes serious strength just to control. The girl lit up the moment the model showed up, grinning as she declared that its red color and features were exactly what she'd been looking for. The guy told her the collectible warrior was going to be the prize, and that news instantly set off a wave of furious outrage in her. She worried that if the warrior stayed on display, it would throw her whole mood off, so she nudged him to hand it over to someone else to give to the winner. He nodded to her idea, then grabbed the model and set out to make that announced decision happen. Still, a little grumble sat in his chest the whole time. She said with zero doubt that she would have won anyway, and then declared she was ready to go to war in the next tournament to seize exactly what she wanted. The guy calmly told his partner that, according to Essel, the right person had to be in the guest room, so they sprinted toward the building, praying they'd find him inside. He hinted the room they needed could be tucked behind those towering, beautifully carved gates standing stone still ahead of them. The moment the strangers showed up, the guards snapped to attention, eyeing them hard, demanding answers on the spot, and trying to figure out exactly who stood in front of them and what brought him here. The guy blurted his name and claimed he was a mobile warrior seller named Yahagi, then told him he had to get in front of Baron Essel right away about something huge. One of the warriors leaned in and quietly explained why they were there, and then the guy pulled out a rare model in a box and told the Baron, straight to his face, that he wanted to hand it over himself. Even with everything they'd shown, the guard stayed stone calm, shook his head, and said regular citizens couldn't pass, then told them to come back another day. The boy pleaded with the guards, stressing how urgent his errand was, and politely begged to be allowed to see the Baron, hoping they'd finally understand. But the guards wouldn't budge 1 inch, blasting him with loud refusals and ordering him to get out right then, before he started any trouble. When he finally got it, his plan failed. Regret crashed over the boy, and he admitted he'd have to hand the warrior to the tournament winner himself, risking nothing at all. Suddenly, he spotted Baron Essel strolling right past and shouted his name at the top of his lungs, praying the Baron would recognize him and step in to flip the whole situation around. The Baron spotted Yahagi and went visibly confused, then blurted in shock why he was even here, because there was no way he expected to see him so suddenly, with no warning at all. Yahagi walked out of the meeting with a breath of relief, flashed a small smile, and announced that a brand new collectible model was ready, one he wanted to unveil as the grand prize for the upcoming tournament. He clocked that the Baron always lights up when anything warrior-related shows up, but today he went strangely quiet, all reserved and unreadable, and that kicked up a storm of questions. Yahagi spun around and froze, because a whole squad of guards came charging toward them fast, faces set with grim seriousness, their determination pounding in every step. Yahagi snapped a panicked look at his companion, realizing they were boxed in, and struggling to figure out why everything had flipped so fast. The gates swung wide in a solemn ceremony, and armed soldiers snapped into place on both sides of the passage, standing guard with weapons ready, pure majesty in the air. Yahagi, still totally clueless about what was going on, stared in stunned confusion, wondering if the nobles he'd spotted up ahead were really the reason all this was happening. One of the attendants suddenly froze mid-step, like something snapped his attention into place, and he just stood there, tense and locked in indecision. The Baron heard the question from his companion, and without a second thought, said that standing right beside him was Yusuke Yahagi, a mobile warrior merchant they'd already crossed paths with before. Yusuke stared at the two towering figures in awe, and a wild thought shot through his head. Maybe this was the king himself, and beside him, his queen. Yahagi let out a breath of relief. If Essel hadn't been there, he would have been wiped out without a trace, especially with the tension still blasting around the gate and the guards. He kept his eyes locked on Michelle, stunned that she stayed perfectly calm while the king closed in, and when everyone expected her to bow, she made zero show of respect. His pulse hammered as the king and queen strode past the guards, and he prayed with everything he had that nothing would go wrong, because the tension kept tightening with every single step. The king's eyes snapped to a new target, and the moment he sensed something off, he narrowed his brows, swung his head toward the commotion, and tried to figure out what or who had just thrown everything into chaos. The king snapped his head around, spotted something he couldn't believe, and blurted out in shock. Then Yahagi's stomach dropped, because now he couldn't stop asking why the king's eyes locked onto him at that exact moment of the meeting. The boy went rigid inside, and dread hit him hard as soon as he realized the king probably clocked the collectible warrior inside the box he'd been gripping in his own hands this whole time. The ruler strode up to Yahagi grinning, eyes sparkling, and leaned in with eager curiosity, demanding to know exactly what he was holding. Staring at the figurine, the king blurted that it looked like a berserker model, then realized something was off about it, and that twist instantly hooked his curiosity even harder. As the queen watched everything unfold, she asked, calm as ice, what made this model different, and the Baron leaned in to explain. It was a rare, specially prepared collectible warrior, made for this one special occasion. While she kept staring at the figurine, she leaned in and told him to hold up for a moment, because she wanted to handle every detail herself and decide what to do next. Meanwhile, Michelle, standing right there, flinched the moment she heard her voice, clamped her hands without meaning to, and felt dread coil tight inside her as everything unfolded. With a half-smile, the queen warned him that wearing a mask in front of the king would look like disrespect, and then snapped, demanding he yank it off right now. Right then, Yahagi snapped to the truth. Michelle's mask was enchanted, wrapped in magic that hid her from every suspicious glance, so nobody would ever think she was strange or worth questioning. The queen's instincts were so razor-sharp they might as well be magic. She sensed every lie and unnatural twitch, until Yahagi finally had no choice but to trust her insight. Michelle could barely contain her excitement, then whispered that she was terrified to show her face. Those burns were so severe they'd look horrible on a royal, especially at an event this official. The queen narrowed her eyes, smiled like she approved, then hit him with a chilling honesty. The hidden face looked even worse, because something far more inconvenient was hiding behind it too. With a sharp, confident tone, she basically told Michelle, "You didn't see this coming," then pushed her to step out. No excuses, no hiding, barefaced and fully revealed, exactly as the rules demanded. While Michelle stayed tight-lipped, Yahagi's stomach dropped. He realized the queen had already clocked who she was, and he forced himself to say Michelle's name carefully, praying that the queen's hunch wouldn't be confirmed for real. A second later, the girl finally eased off her helmet, and bam, her serious, determined face came into view, ready to talk again and take whatever consequences hit next. She asked, cheeks warm, how the queen ever cracked the truth, because that mask was enchanted to cloak the wearer's identity, even from the most nosy eyes. With a coy grin, the queen flicked her fan and said it all gave it away, because if a man never so much as glanced at her, he'd stand out instantly, and that meant the masked person couldn't possibly be who she claimed to be. Michelle didn't take her eyes off the person in front of her. Her fists tightened with pure tension, and she dropped her voice, like she was about to spill a confession she could barely bear to say. The queen saw it right away. The girl had slipped back into that same unconscious habit of clasping her fingers whenever she got really excited, and she leaned in, asking if she'd ever noticed she did it before. Yahagi watched it all spiral out of control, breathed out that this tension was maxed out, and admitted to himself that Michelle's split personality was crystal clear, even before she said a word. The queen gave a small, knowing smile and said Michelle had her number, and Michelle shot back with a quick, confident yes, because yeah, they'd spent a ton of time together back then. Michelle leaned in and reminded her, yeah, they'd shared a roof for ages, and in that time she'd picked up every little habit and mood of the queen, the kind of thing you never, ever forget. The queen snapped her attention to Michelle, calling her her elder sister, and Yahagi's jaw dropped. He blurted out that they really were sisters, because once he stared closer, their face-to-face resemblance was unmistakable. Michelle gave a tight, reserved smile, acted like none of this mattered, and shot back defiantly. So what happens to her now, and what are the others planning to do with her? With fury burning in his eyes, the king snapped that she'd committed a misdemeanor by casting the curse, and ordered her to be punished under the law as written. Michelle shot him a furious glare, fired off a blunt question, and made it crystal clear. He was the one who'd snapped at her first, so all of this chaos happened because of him. The queen stepped in mid-argument and said the curse should have faded long ago, but her brother snapped up in fury and screamed that he didn't care, because the pain was real. Rage blazing in his eyes, the enraged king snapped an order, seize Michelle and call her a witch, and the guards swore they were ready to carry it out right then, no delay. Michelle heard the verdict, dropped her head for a breath, and realized she was being branded a criminal after everything she'd survived. Then she snapped her head up, grinned at what was ahead, and made it clear she wouldn't quit. She'd take everything head-on, chin high. Yusuk's stomach dropped when he heard a soldier openly question whether their forces could even handle this, with their opponent's weird, dangerous powers sitting right there, powers everyone feared. The girl over there, cool as ice and confident to the core, reminds everyone, her opponent is just anyone, it's her own sister. So in her mind, this fight is about to get messy, unpredictable, and brutally hard to call. Yusuk watched a stranger hand over a magic staff, and right then someone warned him, if you can't use magic, even the strongest artifact is dead weight in a real fight. Right then, the magic snapped to life. Blinding energy beams tore through the air, firing straight into the middle of everything and scorching the entire arena in one unstoppable blast. Stunned by what was happening, Michelle couldn't stop wondering, was this the magical energy she was really feeling in her body, and how on earth could it be happening like this? The answer came as a voice saying it was a special artifact with a weird, game-changing effect, and right after that, its owner leaned in and demanded whether Michelle had finally figured out how it actually worked. Michelle blurted out in shock that the staff doesn't just swing. It throws up waves that smash enemy magic, choke the spells midair, and basically shuts down the magical signal within a specific radius. Breathless from what she'd just seen, Michelle whipped around to face her opponent and blurted a question. How in the world did she pull off something that precise and brutally powerful? With a quick smile, she shot back that it all came down to intuition. Then she said the word like it was obvious, right there in the middle of that boiling, tense moment. Michelle heard that answer and, bitterness rising, admitted that from the very start she couldn't accept the existence of disability, because it always fought against everything inside her. The queen was certain Michelle felt the same way, because she didn't feel an ounce of sympathy either. She watched the girl with sharp, suspicious caution. The king snapped back to his senses and roared, praising the queen, saying her rival could only sling spells and do nothing truly great. The king brought up every bit of trouble Michelle had caused him and swore he'd make her pay back, while the queen leaned in and promised she'd see her sister crawling on her knees. The king snapped his orders the instant Mitchell was mentioned. He demanded his soldiers seize him right now, no delays, no second thoughts. The main character slammed into the offender's path, stood his ground beside the witch, and fought off every threat like his life depended on it. Then he slammed in one brutal strike, and the shockwave hit. Everyone in that massive arena felt it, no exceptions. Every soldier standing there in that exact moment froze in total confusion, utterly baffled by the sudden chaos erupting all around them. The hero slapped in a cardboard card as a magical artifact, and the moment it triggered, it blasted the air with a roaring explosive wave. Every single person in that room was left reeling, totally stunned, and they couldn't even begin to figure out where that insane, earth-shaking force was coming from. Turns out the staff can't shut off the magic pouring out of those suites, because it's not even from this world. The queen's eyes lit up the moment she saw the boy's magic, and she wasted no time. She demanded to know where it came from, and what his power really runs on. Yusuk snapped a warning not to underestimate the pastry chefs, his confident tone packed with grit and inner steel, so powerful it left the person he was talking to completely baffled. One soldier spotted the panic spreading through the ranks, then hurried to tell the others it was nothing but wind, but his voice didn't match his nerves, because the air kept tightening, and fear started clenching around every fighter. Yusuke finally realized he'd just hit the biggest problem of his life. Michelle, the one he'd always leaned on, couldn't use magic at all, and suddenly everything was way worse than he ever expected. He balled his fist tight and realized this was it. Time to act. Tap into nothing but his own strength, and push through the wild excitement surging inside him. Yusuk raised the monster card to the sky, voice steady and serious, as he swore he'd do it to protect the candy store's power. Then his eyes lit up like that one promise held the whole key to victory. For half a year, he'd been munching monster chips just to get his hands on this card, pouring every ounce of grit into it. And when the moment came, he yelled the activation word at the top of his lungs, blasting the magic effect to life. A thick surge of energy ripped out of the card, and right in the middle, a towering creature's silhouette started to form as swirling magic spiraled around it, instantly sparking panic in everyone watching. The royal couple and the guards froze in pure shock, staring in horror at what just appeared before them, because nothing about it felt real, and it could flip the power balance in an instant. Ancient Dragon Bismarck burst into view before everyone's eyes, and it turned out to be an SSSR-class beast, its massive size and brutal aura snapping every witness's attention in an instant. Yusuk bragged that this creature was the absolute best the candy shop could offer, and he said it with such fearless certainty that you could tell he'd go to any lengths to protect his friends, and still come out on top. The stone walls of the arena rattled as the tech entrance burst open, massive platform rising and rolling in with someone important, maybe even dangerous, sending the whole crowd into instant panic. On the platform loomed a gigantic robot, menacing and jaw-dropping, as loud gears and grinding mechanisms roared to life. And before anyone could react, the referee snapped in, declaring the fight over. The girl who just got beaten clenched her fists in pure frustration. Her opponent snuck in from behind, left her helpless, and the one who managed to get behind her walked away with the win. She watched her million-lire investment and her dream of a berserker warrior crumble to dust, and bitterness flooded her as defeat slammed into her chest. Later, she pulled aside a friend and blurted out, shocked, that her magic control had been way sharper that morning. Now something felt wildly different, and she couldn't explain it. Her listener clocked it too, and suddenly both of them were like, why did this happen? So they started digging for the truth behind it. The girl clenched her focus and lifted the staff. Then the magic circle surged to life around her, only to feel an unseen force choking her power, stopping it from fully manifesting. She stared at the instrument, and it clicked. Maybe the fault wasn't inside her at all, but in some outside force squeezing her magic shut. Right then, Yusuk burst beside her, pulled her into a tight hug, and with fire in his eyes, he swore the future was theirs to seize, built on grit, trust, and faith in each other. Yusuk and Michelle faced the ancient dragon, towering over them, blazing with raw power, but the boy didn't flinch. He straight up said he didn't have time for what was happening in this moment, determination hardening his expression. The queen and king breath hitched as they stared into the huge dragon, raw fear and awe punching straight through their souls. Then they demanded answers, stunned that Yusuk could pull off summoning magic in those conditions, because it felt impossible and shattered everything they thought they knew. When everyone stared in shock, Yusuk flashed the card in his hand with a sly little smirk, shrugged that he'd only used a tiny taste of sweets like it didn't matter. Yet the way he said it hinted that a huge secret was buried right under his words. The waves from Queen Titty's staff kept wiping out regular magic, but they couldn't touch the candy store's spellwork, so that artifact suddenly felt way less powerful in this moment. Bismarck Yusuk's time-limited summoned ancient dragon could only stay here for 3 minutes, and as panic hit, Yusuk knew they had to break out of the magic suppression zone before they could pull off the next step. Michelle wore a look of pure worry, and right then it hit Yusuk. She could use her powers to save herself, but if she did, they'd probably both have to flee the country and vanish into hiding. Yusuk dialed Bismarck inside his head, braced to issue the order, and a fierce grin snapped onto his face because this right here is when their most crucial, most deadly advance starts. He snapped to the people he cared about most, his everyday customers, his friends, and the relatives from the candy store, and that thought hit hard, because if he wanted to keep them safe, he had to move fast, no hesitation. He ordered the dragon to stop holding back, unleash its full power, and smash everything in its path, because the stakes were sky-high now, and there was no room for any compromise at all. The queen and the king were absolutely horrified, clinging to each other on pure instinct, stunned at how everything spiraled out of control so fast, and why the world snapped into chaos so suddenly. The young man snaps his eyes upward and spots 2 figures cutting through the sky, charging straight at him, right as a furious cry of protest erupts, like someone's about to crash in and stop whatever's about to happen. A stranger with grit in his eyes suddenly dives at the dragon, lassoing it tight in ropes, and Bismarck, shocked and lost, can't even react before his movements get yanked into chains. As the dragon thrashes helplessly, thick ropes yank tight and pin its wings and body in place, while the stranger locks in and holds that brutal tension, determined to freeze the monster solid until the next move. Yusuk froze when 2 figures dropped out of the sky, and right then a piercing shout tore through the air. Someone was ready to stop it no matter what, consequences be damned. One newcomer lunged in like a missile, striking the massive dragon with razor-precise accuracy, and the dragon itself snapped into a defensive state, its eyes suddenly sharp with surprise and raw tension. She gripped the lasso tight and with it, lashed the dragon up in thick ropes, pinning him down so he couldn't move, even though he was massive and fought with everything he had. A towering warrior with hair whipping in the wind stood at the heart of the arena, pure confidence and power pouring off her, and everyone watching finally understood. This fight had just flipped, and things would never be the same again. Meanwhile, the dragon got totally pinned in place, even with all that power, and right there, one of the heroes stood nearby, proving that their weapon's brutal hit could flip the whole fight from here on out. The dragon's massive form crumbled away into nothing, vanishing into thin air the moment the spell lost its grip. Then the arena fell deathly silent, broken only by a watcher calmly sizing up every move. Yusuke and the girl beside him froze in silent shock when they learned the arena was built with taxpayer money, and the realization instantly made everything feel even more awkward, because if it got destroyed, the fallout would hit everyone standing there. The general jabbed a finger at the girl and demanded that he handle her first. She'd have to survive the prescribed punishment before anyone could finish dealing with her. With a contemptuous grin, the king snapped that traitors stood before him, ordered his men to crush them right away, and then confidently passed the command to his subordinates. With the sword strapped behind him, the general stayed ice calm, eyes sharp, mind steady, watching everything play out like it was right on schedule. He let out a booming laugh, spun toward the girl, and stared in disbelief that she was the champion of mobile martial arts, awed by the sheer power behind her name. When the challenge hit the air, the witch snapped, no, shutting the fight down cold. She didn't feel it was worth dragging out their old showdown, even as the enemy strutted in with all that confidence. Meanwhile, the king revealed the witch's powers were sealed, for now, so she turned into nothing more than an ordinary person, no real threat left. With a crooked smoke smile, the king confessed he wanted the witch to kneel right away after they captured her, clear as day that his goal was pure humiliation. After staring hard at the magic staff, the general whips around to face the merchant like he's about to unleash a crucial demand, or demand an explanation for everything that's going on. The merchant finally clocked what was really going on, and he saw the whole mess was unfolding exactly like this. The general admitted he'd known from the start the witch was hiding behind a mask, and the truth didn't shock him one bit. It just locked in what he'd been suspecting all along. The young man listened, locked in, as his opponent grinned and even hinted he might spare him, if the young man admitted he had no clue who the witch really was. The couple studied every word and move of their opponent, while behind them, hostile faces loomed and pushed them, dangerously towards salvation. Michelle clenched her fists, and the truth hit her hard. Life was hers alone, yet choice still felt like something she barely ever got. Fate kept circling in the young man's head, because ever since he landed in this world, every choice he made felt like it was stolen from him, like nothing was truly his. He remembered how his power earned him the shop in the first place, and every other step, dungeon runs, trips to the springs, came only because other people pushed him forward. He knew the invitation to date didn't come from him, it came from Michelle, and that truth left him feeling trapped, like he needed her to survive. Then he finally got it. There comes a moment when you have to make your own choice, no matter what everyone else expects or what life hands you. Out of all he could pick, love was the only answer. He stared at Michelle and knew, right then, she was the one he couldn't live without. With her face tucked behind a fan and a sly grin flashing, the girl turned to the main character and basically dared him. Leaving someone gloomy like her was brutal, especially when she looked just like his sister. The main character and Michelle just stood a bit off to the side, refusing to bite. She kept on snickering, gloating that everyone had gathered to watch her rival get dumped by her own lover like it was some comedy show. And while she laughed, people also pointed out that Titty was the sexier, more flirtatious sister, so she naturally pulled in way more attention wherever she went. Even with her obvious superiority, the protagonist's mind snapped to something crucial. Right then, he stared at the girl with tight restraint, and she just clutched her fan and threw out a sarcastic line about the threat, admitting she'd even gotten scared. He stood there all confidence and snapped that he was choosing Michelle, no doubts, none at all, then let his emotions rip, told Titty to shut up, and even called her a scarecrow, making it crystal clear how he felt about her behavior. Titty was stunned by what she'd just heard, her brain scrambling to catch up to the name, and the moment it landed, her lips trembled and her face went totally blank with shock, because she never saw an answer like that coming. Slowly, it hit her like a punch, and she stared dumbfounded, then blurted, "Wait, did they just call me a scarecrow?" Another shocked gasp tore out of her, because she could barely wrap her head around the fact that the name on that address was actually hers. Suddenly, rage surged through her and she screamed for proof that her name really was that. And while the protagonist stayed calm, he told her straight. She might have a pretty face, but her vile attitude ruined everything and killed any chance of people taking her seriously. Then he acted, yanking open his mechanical gauntlet and shouting for the artifact to unfold, his face locked in fierce resolve as he stopped hiding how serious he was and braced for the next move. Michelle snapped her gaze to Yusuk, shaking with agitation and dread, and blurted out that she couldn't believe he'd actually pull off that exact magic. Then it hit him, use the magic called clairvoyance to steal a rare chance to peer straight into the future. Yusuk, a young man packed in with markers all around him, shouted that he wanted the projectile to land, while everyone around him yelled for him to stop, screaming that it was too dangerous. Then the moment of truth hit. He had to decide, once and for all. Was his final call solid and unshakable? The young guy looked wrecked with nerves, gripping a handful of candies, while the smiling man beside him stayed perfectly calm. The man burst into laughter, pointed at the woman who had everyone in awe and called her a scarecrow, then admitted he'd completely changed his mind about the merchant. He clenched his certainty and sealed his final decision. The smiling man kept on strolling forward, calm as ever. The crowd, women included, stared in total disbelief, like what they were seeing might shatter reality right in front of them. Bardos got slammed into a confrontation when his companion accused him and promised to stand against him, and the whole room went ice cold the moment that person said they were coming for what was Bardos's. Bardos stepped in to settle it with his younger brother, choosing reconciliation over bloodshed and pushing for a peaceful ending. He admitted he came back from the front just to rest, but the moment he did, he realized he couldn't take it anymore, second-guessing his own choice while plain exhaustion swallowed him whole. Bardos spat that he was being dragged around by fools, seething at the leadership and cracking under the pressure of how things were going. They snapped that Bardos had crossed a line by talking against the king, and the anger in their voice made it clear. This wasn't just trouble, it was a political fuse with consequences about to explode. Bardos boomed to everyone that his soldiers had already boxed in the arena, then he snapped into action, kicking off the coup, crowning himself king on the spot, and laying out his ruthless plan to seize the kingdom's power. Bardos flashed a grin, told his opponent he was the older brother, and then announced he was staging a coup, fully convinced his move and plan would work. His opponent blurted coup with sheer shock and alarm, suddenly grasping just how massive everything was and how badly it could blow up for the kingdom. They blurted out to Bardos, begging him not to do something reckless, snapping him back to his senses before the planned coup detonated into disaster. Bardos clamped a hand around his opponent's throat, proving he had the strength to win and the ruthlessness to use it to seize control. Bardos stood surrounded by soldiers and solemnly declared it was time to honor the old days and crush the petty fights once and for all. Then he roared that decisive action was finally starting. The soldiers who got that secret order admitted one thing: slaying the dragon felt like a mission no one could pull off, but they squared their shoulders and swore they'd do their duty anyway. Bardos barked for his brother to be brought straight to his office, where he'd sign a stack of crucial decrees, proof that this whole power grab was perfectly organized. The trapped boy snapped bitterly, "Is this any better than dying?" Despair crushing him as he realized just how hopeless and deadly his situation really was. Right in the arena, a sudden twist hit. Then a girl burst into view, clearly stunned, completely lost about what was happening all around her. Another character pointed out that the queen was joining them too, and that made it crystal clear. The coup plan was hitting the entire royal family. Someone demanded the girl be freed, and you could tell the conspirators were split, arguing not just how to pull off their plan, but what to do with the prisoners. The participants are left staring at each other in confusion. Should they bail out now or stay and finish what they started? One of the characters snapped with shock when they stumbled on an object that threw fresh chaos into the middle of the coup unfolding. He fervently hoped the item would be put back where it belonged, and he let out a huge wave of relief that the box was still whole, because he was genuinely worried for anything important. The man snapped his gaze to the boy and promised that the Berserker statue would go to whoever won that brutal, make-or-break battle. Baron Essel spun toward his conversation partner, and his sudden presence flipped the entire situation as political tides in the kingdom began to shift. He anxiously demanded, "Do you know what happened?" because all he could think about was whether the whole town had caught wind of the coup. The Baron, choked with regret, admitted he'd dragged other people into all this, begged for forgiveness, and owned up to the mess the situation had created. The Baron stepped up, offered to carry the object, begged for forgiveness, and kept right on being part of everything that came after the coup. A bunch of characters get caught under a storm of falling snow, and the chill feels like a warning. Something big is about to shake up the kingdom's politics. The tournament organizer blasted into the crowd, saying the fight would go on no matter what, and the winners would still get to see it through to the end. The Baron stared into the smoke of it all, realizing the royal tournament's political web had already been untangled by everything that happened. Some people demanded they bury the bitterness of regret in the past, accept what happened, then push forward once the coup finally ended. Just a few days after everything went down, Yusuk found himself near a towering castle, and even its high walls seemed to echo the changes those hard choices had already set in motion. The capital's loud proclamation shocked everyone. General Bartos had just been crowned the new king, and the people erupted in joy because new decrees slashed taxes, cut the royal family's costs, and tightened the grip on power. The old king and queen, once rulers of everything, got thrown into the towering prison called Rondas, slammed with treason charges and stripped down to nothing. After bungling the state with reckless choices before, their privileges were stripped away, and now they're stuck in poverty for the rest of their lives, paying for every mistake they made. They ditched the plan to build a whole new palace for the former queen too, because the money left in the treasury still couldn't cover the damage and costs that had already been wrecking the country. And just like that, the revolution was over, and when the people finally saw how brutal life used to be, they dared to dream again, careful but hopeful, feeling that a brighter future was creeping closer. Meanwhile, Yusuke and Michelle slipped right back into their candy store job, calm as glass, standing before the sign like they were daring the world to believe this was all their idea. Even with a new king on the throne and chaos raining down, Yusuke's routine stayed locked in. He still opened his shop by the springs every day, same old rhythm, no break in the beat. Another day kicked off like always, and Yusuke flashed a polite smile at the newcomer, no clue what kind of ending this visit was about to blow up into. A radiant old man strode in, flanked by 2 armored bodyguards, and the room felt like it just got hit with a secret meeting, one that would change everything fast. Yahagi snapped in surprise when Baron Essel strode into the shop, smiled at him, and admitted it had been ages since they'd last seen each other, while the Baron kept that polite grin and calmly reminded Yahagi how much time had slipped by since their last meeting. The young man dashed off his congratulations, bragging that he'd heard about the Baron's promotion, then pressed him on why he'd come, so Essel paused just long enough to cut straight to the real reason, clearly getting ready to explain. The Baron lowered his gaze and, with bitter regret, confessed that the Mobile Suit Tournament was just a smokescreen to keep the queue moving, and he even admitted he could already feel how mad Yahagi would be about it. Yahagi stayed cool and said he wasn't angry, but he admitted the whole situation felt awful, especially with how sudden it was and what it set in motion. Essel threw himself at Yahagi, apologizing with raw, sincere regret, swearing he never wanted anything like this to erupt during the tournament, and every word dripped with remorse. After the explanation landed, Yahagi started chewing on the Baron's words, because he was dead certain this was the only play to drag the king out of that castle, guarded by the most brutal magic around. Yahagi hung his head, wearing a heavy face as he admitted he'd come just to deliver a personal apology, and in that moment, Yahagi realized how rare people like that really were. Yahagi realized Baron Essel wasn't nearly as awful as his title made him seem, and that surprising worthiness instantly won him real respect. The Baron's eyes snapped up at the words "new mobile warriors," and Yahagi leaned in, dropping his voice to say this was information meant only for him, like the next wave of innovations mattered more than anything. Yahagi rolled out 2 fresh fighters, the crossbowman Gurjikas and the speedy warrior Zeke, then teased that they could hit the sail block later. The Baron got this critical news right away, and the moment he heard it, genuine curiosity lit up his focus. The young man gave a restrained smile and told the Baron straight up. He only wanted to apologize for what happened, nothing more, so the Baron could see how genuine he was, and he made it clear he wasn't asking for anything back, trusting the man to understand. His inner voice kept repeating one thing: just let me live in peace. So he stepped up, served the next customer with a steady kindness, and reminded himself that this simple life, quiet and real, was what mattered most. The girl beamed as she delivered the customer's order, clutching 2 bottles of drinks in her hands, and her bright grin practically shouted how much she loved this calm, everyday work, especially with someone she cared about right there beside her. The girl's jaw drops when she realizes Minerva is the very witch Michelle they were hunting all along, and she learns the author had her name wiped from the criminal list after his request. Michelle finally rips her mask off and jumps in to help at the store, and Yusuke's right beside her, until everyone suddenly realizes she's his girlfriend. The bespectacled girl stares in disbelief. Yusuk actually joined the coup, and he blurts out a shaky explanation, desperate to calm her raging shock. The girl can't stop gushing about how Yusuk summoned a massive dragon to save her from the king and queen, like the whole wild thing happened just for her. Yusuk can't shake this uneasy feeling, thinking the coup's story reeks of exaggeration, while everyone else just praises what he did. To prove it, Yusuk pulls Michelle into a tight hug and boldly announces that what they have is real, because yeah, they're officially dating. The girl leaned in, glowing as she listened to that heartfelt confession, then erupted with pure joy, shouting her congratulations at the top of her lungs as she beamed like she couldn't be happier for them. She hopes Yusuk and Michelle find true happiness, and right then, this other girl with a downcast face barely manages to choke out a quick, shaky ah, completely unable to hide what she's feeling. Myra's eyes burn with tears as she swallows her sobs, realizing the rumors about first love, never mutual, were dead on in her case. Myra's friend coaxes her into sharing sake and ramen, sure she can take it, because once the drinks hit, Myra's eyes will spill, she'll wallow, then she'll feel a whole lot better. Yusuk glanced back at the snow and suddenly remembered. He'd entered this world when spring was just starting, so seeing winter already swallowed up the streets hit him like a shock. The first snow hit, chilling him to the bone, and he couldn't believe how fast time had vanished since he landed in this world. Even as the seasons shifted and everything he'd been through piled up, his life kept charging ahead, still moving at the exact same heartbeat. He felt zero regret and kept replaying it in his head, knowing, no matter what happened, he'd made every choice with pure confidence. Baron Hessel told the king that the young man they were talking about hadn't just accepted his fate, he was fighting back, throwing himself in front of the one he loved. The general heard Yusuk's reasoning and froze. Yusuk's grit hit him hard, because at first he'd pegged him as just a normal merchant, but now he realized he'd actually found a fierce wild force. Back then the Baron couldn't shake the look in Yusuk's eyes, pure fire, daring to challenge anything for a girl, and it branded itself into his mind. One of the advisors snapped that nobody like him could be simple, because he chose love over his own comfort, safety, and profit. The Baron sat down with the king to talk about Yusuk's request and finally admitted the truth. He didn't want a thing back, not even payment, he only wanted the girl freed, and that shocked him to his core. The king ended with a small smile and basically said, if you can spot someone more precious than the entire world, you're not nearly as simple as you look. Yusuk, when he heard the proposal, got an invite to a soon-to-happen procession honoring Saint Cordelius, and he couldn't believe the details they laid out, totally stunned as he listened. The girls told Yusuk that Cordelius was a priest who'd helped the Sikh during the epidemic, and that every year a festival, complete with a grand procession and lanterns, honors him, and that alone lit up Yusuk's curiosity. Yusuk mumbled to himself, comparing the procession to those wild Japanese lantern festivals. Then one of the girls leaned in and told him that, during the festival, the streets go crazy with market stalls, and he should bring along glowing sweets, neon jelly with 5 flavors. New Year's Eve rolled in, and the girls stared at those glowing sweets, completely mesmerized. Like, seriously, they insisted that treats this beautiful had to be sold on a night this bright.